Hey guys, and welcome to Quality Shot. I'm really excited to be joined by none other than the cricket connoisseur, Aaron. How are you doing, mate?
I'm doing very well, Faizan. Very well. I mean, the sun is out in Warwickshire today. It's absolutely beautiful. I know it is down there in Surrey as well. Obviously, just come off the back of a fascinating series between England versus India. And yeah, to be honest, mate, pretty happy. Also, just 10 days to go until the county championship gets underway. So, all in all, pretty happy. How about yourself, mate?
Yeah, I'm really good. I'm surprised you're in such chipper spirits after getting clean swept by India, but it's fine. As Aaron has just alluded to, we are going to be going over England's tour of India, pretty comprehensive tour, 4 test matches, 5 T20s and 3 ODIs. We're just going to touch upon the most recent series, which is the ODIs first. India obviously edging England in that one, 2-1. But it was good in the fact that it culminated in a competitive, thrilling ending with India just edging England by 7 runs in that third ODI. First of all, what was your prediction actually going into this? Did it come out the way you thought?
Well, I don't want to say this. I'm here in my England shirt. But for the first time, arguably in like a year and a half, I got every single series spot on. Every single one. I said 3-1 in the tests, 3-2 in the T20s, and 2-1 in the ODIs.
Wow.
So that's terrifying, first of all. That's not a good sign at all, because usually my predictions are completely off the mark. It's one of my weaker parts of my cricket analysis, to be honest, the predictions. But yeah, India, I mean, came out winners in all 3. And of course, we'll dissect it a bit more in depth as this show goes on. But yeah, what a series. What a series it was. Absolutely brilliant. And what a tour. I mean, I know England came out on the wrong side of the result in the end. I know we only won 4 out of the 12 games in this series. But my word, what a series it was, and what a tour. I mean, definitely memorable to say the least.
Yeah, definitely memorable. I think for some good and some probably bad reasons of certain players as well. But yeah, definitely an action-packed tour. It's interesting because I think the only thing that I could say that I was a little bit disappointed was the amount of one-sided matches we saw. Considering they're 2 very evenly matched teams in, I guess you could say in the white ball series for sure. Test matches maybe not as much in India. So the test matches, I was like, okay, that's fine. But then when we got to the T20s and ODIs, it kind of, one team blew hot, one team blew cold, and it seemed to happen throughout most of it. And I think I remember there was one T20 and one ODI, obviously the most recent ODI, that were competitive. But I could say, actually, you know what? That went down to the wire. Whereas, normally when you see a cricket match and you know what the result's going to be kind of midway or 3/4 in, to me, I'm like, come on, you guys have got this ability. I'm like, what's happening? And it just seemed like they caught each other on the wrong days almost, which is quite funny. But on the whole, the level of skill on the show I thought was fantastic. I mean, these two are, England and India are arguably the 2 best cricketing nations in the world at the moment. So we definitely saw some incredible flashes of brilliance from both. On the ODI series then, you said 2-1. I actually predicted 2-1 and 3-2 for T20s like you. But the test matches, I was a bit optimistic and I said 2-2. So I got that one wrong, unfortunately. No clean sweep for me. Let's, I guess, start off with England, actually, and a couple of talking points, because obviously coming into World Cup champions, so there was some expectation, but no Joe Root because he's been rested, no Wokes, who I think a lot of people forget, and I'm sure you don't because you're from Warwickshire, that he is so integral to England's ODI kind of format. I mean, he's so integral. He opens the bowling with Archer, and also he's a very handy bat lower down the order. So, and he's done very well. And I think he's underrated, actually, not just here, but around the world. And when I was talking to subscribers, they kind of forget that he's even part of it. So obviously him and Root, and then Archer was injured, which was a huge miss. But to be fair, on the flip side, India had Bumrah, who had recently gotten married. So, he doesn't want to play cricket. He's just enjoying himself on his honeymoon. And we've got Jadeja, who's injured as well. So I guess you kind of say is a little bit of equal in terms of ability players missing, maybe England slightly a little worse off. I wanted to get your thoughts though on, first of all, Bairstow. I want to start with him because he had a pretty bad test series, but in the ODIs especially, he was really impressive for me. He just normally, actually, when I first remember seeing England play ODI cricket with those 2 opening up, you used to say Roy's the one who looks good. he's the one that looks good. He's really attractive to watch. And Bairstow, he might clear his front foot. He's a bit ugly, but actually it was all the way around in this series, I felt. Bairstow was really good to watch. Very kind of in line, full face of the bat. He knows his arc. He knows his arc is between maybe mid-off to square leg. He knows that's my arc and I'll back myself. Whereas Roy, I thought, was going quite hard at the ball, seemed to just be in T20 mode and didn't back himself in his timing. What were your thoughts on Bairstow and Roy as well?
Well, let's face it, Johnny Bairstow, absolutely exceptional. Brilliant series. Loves playing India as well. In fact, since the 1st of January 2019, averages over 60 against India in ODI cricket, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's just a testament to the pedigree of Johnny Bairstow's batting against the men in blue. And in this series, he was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. And I just think of that barrage of 4s and 6s against Kuldeep Yadav. It was absolutely blockbuster to watch as an England fan. It really was tearing apart. I mean, fair enough, they didn't have Bumrah, they didn't have Jadeja, but that Indian attack, we all know about the depth and the strength in depth that India possess. And he took the attack to them in truly brutal fashion. It was brilliant to watch, and I think we all enjoyed it. And of course, deserved man of the series, in my opinion, Johnny Bairstow. And as you said, he looked so composed, so assured in his game. Of course, unfortunately, in the last game to get out for one, did go across his stumps, which was a bit strange. It's something we didn't really see in the first two. In fact, if anything, he was staying more leg side and then decided to walk across his stumps, which was quite strange. But other than that last dismissal, absolutely imperious. Brilliant series for Johnny Bairstow. And yeah, deserving man of the series. In terms of Jason Roy, I actually agree with you there, Faizan. I think he didn't look himself again. But with that being said, he had a really bad 2020. He looked woefully out of form in ODI cricket. He's averaging something like 9, and his strike rate was about 80. So maybe that's something which can be understandable. Maybe this is almost a stepping stone for him heading into future series to get that rhythm back. Because as we all know with Jason Roy, when he's at his best, when he's confident, when he's in full flow and rhythm, he's one of the greatest batsmen on the planet in white ball cricket. But in this series, I felt like he's still just trying to find that rhythm in ODI cricket, slowly but surely getting back. With that being said, I don't think he had a bad series at all. He really didn't. I mean, even in the last game, that beautiful shot against Bhuvaneshwar Kumar down the ground. Oh, so good to watch. So good to watch. And I know he got out, obviously, on the last ball of the over. But yeah, those two as an opening combo, absolutely brilliant. We're very fortunate here in England to have those two opening the batting for the Three Lions. And yeah, may we see many more substantial partnerships to come from those pair heading into the future.
Yeah, I mean, these two have just been in imperious form for a number of years. I mean, Bairstow, people might forget, but he averages nearly 50. It's like 49.36 or something, I think, is his average, which I'm sure has been boosted after this series slightly as well. And Jason Roy in the 40s, and they both players' strike rates are above 100 actually, which is incredible in ODI cricket, and that shows England's, I guess, philosophy, which I want to get your thoughts on, kind of different philosophies between the two teams even. Yeah, I agree with Jason Roy. It's so funny because I reckon that last innings where he got out for not many, I think it was 14, wasn't it? He hit Bhuvaneshwar Kumar for 14 off that over. They got out last ball. He probably looked the best that he had done throughout the whole series. That first ball that he got, it was swinging away. It was a half volley, just leant on it, cover drive. It was just beautiful to watch. First ball, I just thought, you know what, he's going to do it. This is going to be the one where he's going to show because obviously as a Surrey fan, I've seen him for a number of years and I know what he's capable of. And I know that he's not someone who is just, I want to hit as hard as I can, fast hands. Like he can play proper shots on top of having that bit of innovation that you get from T20. And I felt like he'd gone away from that a little bit. And as you said, his form has been pretty poor. Very poor in 2020. So I guess this is a start of something better.
Yeah.
I saw him tighten up a little bit in the way that he plays. He was kind of falling over slightly when he was hitting. It just didn't really seem in nick 100%, but that was a good sign. And he just got a really good ball from Bhuvaneshwar Kumar.
Yeah, beautiful ball.
It was beautiful, wasn't it? I mean, it just shaped in a little bit, just seamed and took off stump. And I think he just thought to himself, normally, right, when he gets out, he'll have a fit, he'll chuck his gloves and he gets really annoyed with himself. But that one, I think he just thought, oh, okay, fine, fair enough, and that's when he got a good ball. So I can think fair enough. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in better form and hopefully for Surrey as well. But yeah, that's a good sign, I think, for England. I guess then going down the order, why not? Stokes at 3. What were your initial thoughts when England did that?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? It's a very, very interesting one. And I imagine that we'll talk about, obviously, squad rotation and selection at some point in today's show, Faizan. But to be honest, I think as soon as we saw that first innings and he got out for one, I think a lot of people were thinking, oh dear, this is an experiment gone horribly wrong. And then in the second ODI, he produced arguably the knock of the series. I think that alongside Bairstow's 124 were the two real standout knocks for me. That 99 from 52 deliveries. And again, it was brutal power hitting against the likes of Kuldeep Yadav and Krunal Pandya. For me, I don't think it's long term. I'm going to be honest, because we have Joe Root there. Joe Root's been so successful as our anchor, was brilliant during the World Cup, brilliant during bilateral series beforehand as well. But it does just show that Ben Stokes can bat in the top order. And the interesting thing for me, I know it's a different format, but there are going to be more and more conversations about him being in the top four for the T20Is. There just are. When you see that, when you see what Ben Stokes is capable of, when he has that bit more time to really build an innings per se, and then explode as the innings progresses, I think he's knocking down the door to the top four. And I think we could actually touch upon that a bit later, Faizan. But for me, very impressive. He was impressive, and the way in which he got out, yes, it was very unlucky. But up until that point, I think he was excellent. I really do think he is good. But for me, for the time being, as soon as Joe Root comes back, I'd put him down at 4 or 5. If I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't keep him at 3 long term.
Yeah, it was initially it was a bit of a strange one for me because I just thought when he got out for one, I wasn't like, oh, that's they shouldn't put him there. I was more like initially before he even got that one, I just thought, as you're thinking, well, Root has been one of England's best threes in ODI cricket probably ever, and he's one of their best white ball players ever as well. To be fair, if you look at how well he's played over the past whatever it is 10 years, but he will just slot in there, no doubt. He'll slot in at 3. Well, that's what I think anyway. So my initial thinking was, why they put him at 3 when long term he's not going to be at 3? Why not put him at 4, where potentially he might be able to bat long term if they don't want to if Morgan doesn't want to be there. If Morgan says, actually, I'm going to take a back seat and I'll go down 1 or 2, if they put Butler up, who knows? Then he might say, okay, well, Stokes, you can be at 4 and we want to have you see more balls. But maybe it was just a case of maybe long term I'll go with him at 4, but in this series because Joe wasn't there, well, here we go. You can have as many balls as kind of possible without opening to face and kind of get used to batting a bit earlier on in the innings. So can you see them potentially it being Root at 3, Stokes on 4? Then you don't think it'll be the other way around, I'm assuming.
No, I think that could be. And of course, that all depends on Owen Morgan. I mean, at the end of the day, it's his team. It's his philosophy. He has created this team pretty much from the ground up ever since 2015. So, of course, that's Owen Morgan's decision. But as you rightfully said there, Faizan, if he does want to make that decision, he wants to take a bit of a backseat in the team from a batting perspective and wants to move down to 5, for example, put Stokes at 4. And as you rightfully said, this series gave him a bit more experience of having that extra responsibility, batting slightly higher up the order.
Yeah, I agree. I want to actually touch upon the kind of newbies per se. Milan's not really a newbie, but he'd only played 1 ODI before this series and then played the second, got a not out, and the third one obviously he was quite impressive, getting 50 off 50 balls. And then I thought he was going to start to motor, but got out in a pretty loose way, let's say. I think he was very frustrated with himself. Livingston had a couple of flashes of some big hitting, which I know here for Lancashire, he normally bats at 3, if I'm not mistaken, in the 50 over format. So it was interesting. I initially thought they might go Livingston at 3 instead of Stokes, right? And they didn't. They went with him at 6, but he seemed to have just taken it on really and just said, well, okay, I've got a bit more license. So rather than playing that more anchor role, I can be more explosive and play almost a T20 knock. And that's what he was doing in those 2. What were your thoughts on the 2? And can you see them? I'm assuming they're going to be in and around the squad, but can you see them at any point being able to push forward after this kind of this short, I guess, bit of data that we've got from them?
Well, of course, it is very limited data, to say the least. Let's face it, they played 2 games. But with that being said, I think for Milan, I'm going to be honest, T20 cricket is for him. I think that's where he's really established his niche in this England side. In one-day cricket, he's not going to be playing 3 or 4. I'm going to be honest, in particular, not number 3, because we've been talking there about Joe Root. Joe Root's cemented that to an extent that not many other people on the planet have, per se. With regards to Livingston, though, that's an interesting one. And it is a very interesting case for 2023. Because let's face it, Liam Livingstone isn't that old. He's still got time to mature and develop as a cricketer heading into that 2023 World Cup in India. So he could potentially be in that team. But I think that all depends on Owen Morgan. If Owen Morgan decides not to be the captain, or if he decides to retire in ODI cricket beforehand, we don't know. Obviously, at the end of the day, that is Owen Morgan's decision, and we'll respect it either way. But I think if Owen Morgan was to theoretically retire and there was a place in that middle order, it'd be between Livingston and Billings. And if you want that extra bit of bowling, Liam Livingston makes sense. I thought he was absolutely brilliant in this series. And you mentioned there about a couple of the shots. That shot that he played, I think it was either second or third ball, against Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, was one of the most outrageous, audacious, and quite frankly extraordinary shots that I think I've seen on a cricket field in a long time. It was absolutely preposterous. To do that, I think, on his second ball in ODI cricket, to have that confidence, the swagger, the self-belief in your batting, to walk down the pitch and hit arguably the bowler of the series over his head for six. My God, the boy's got confidence. He really has. So for me, I think Livy is the more likely one. But as I said, it depends. That England top 6, top 7 even is so strong. We have so many options. But I think out of those two, if one of them was to make the push into a starting 11, I think it'd be Liam Livingston.
Yeah, I agree. I think long term, given Darren Moran's age as well, and maybe the style of players that they are, I can definitely see that. And it's interesting to see long term what Livingston does. But wouldn't be surprised if he gets more chance. I think Milan's there just because, I mean, he was a reserve player. And then what happened is Morgan and Billings got injured, right? And that's why he came in. But I think it's funny because I reckon if this was any other era of English cricket, he probably would be in a starting 11 in the ODIs Milan. But it's just the fact that they've got Root, they've got Stokes, they've got Morgan, they've got all these players that they can count. They're World Cup champions. I mean, this is probably the strongest ODI team we've ever seen for England. So,
easily.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost a nightmare trying to get into that side in a way. It's almost easier to get into the Test side, which sounds crazy to say because most of the time it's not in most teams. Very briefly, I just want to touch on Morgan and Butler because they didn't have a particularly good ODI series. I mean, Morgan only didn't play too many games, obviously, because of the injury, split his webbing on his hand. But Butler seems to have this slight deficiency. I don't know what you think about this, but it came to fruition, I think, in the T20 series. And then I think India exploited it, which is him falling over a little bit, kind of over his front pad, playing around it, and his head is not quite still, which he has this very unorthodox way of playing, which most of the time works. And his head is not. If you teach a kid how to play cricket, you wouldn't necessarily show them Joss Butler. And that's nothing against Joss Butler because he's supremely talented. But if you see a lot of times when he plays a drive, his head is tilted. But the issue is that when he's getting out here, getting trapped LBW, his head is almost falling over and he's off balance whilst he's getting trapped, which is why he's getting trapped for me, LBW, like middle to leg stump. And he's kind of falling over himself. Is that an issue for Joss Butler going forward? And I'm assuming it's something that needs to be tweaked and tightened up. What did you notice it at all, or was it just me?
I did notice that actually. With the Bhuvaneshwar Kumar dismissal in particular, I think that was the real standout for me because, as you said, his head was very off balance. It was off kilter. It was very, well, untraditional to say the least, as opposed to what you're told really and how to bat. But for me, I'm not sure whether it's a problem or not. I don't think that we can really pin it down to this series. I think we're going to have to see and kind of, we'll measure that over the summer. I think if Pakistan and Sri Lanka, for example, and Pakistan later on in the year, of course, when we make the journey over there before the World Cup, if it does keep cropping up, then yes, something does need to change. But you know what? It's Joss Butler. It's Joss Butler. He will learn. He can evolve. He can adapt his game. He's one of the greatest white ball cricketers on the planet right now. So for me, I don't think it's going to be an absolutely lethal flaw in his game. But if he deems it, as something which is going to be problematic, then yes, he can work on it. But again, that's all up to Joss. I don't think it's going to be something which will cost him too many runs in the long term, as long as it doesn't keep cropping up again and again and again.
I agree. And as an England fan, Ono Morgan, obviously he didn't play too many matches, but having a look at his stats since the 2019 World Cup, I think he scored 100. I don't think he scored a 50. I think the 100 was against Ireland, which no offense to Ireland, but they're not as big as your Australias, the Indias, the South Africas, etc. Is there a slight worry among England fans that he's on the decline and maybe he's taking that back seat? Because for me, someone who's looking in, I'm a little bit of an England fan. I wouldn't say I'm a diehard. I mean, I follow them very closely. But for me, looking on the outside in, I feel like he's just slightly on the slide. And as you said, you mentioned retirement, which I don't think we would normally talk about. But I just think he's been there, done it all. He's revolutionized this whole ODI side, especially since 2015 to now. So it's been 6 years. And it would have been a lot of effort a lot of time put into it to completely overhaul England's philosophy, the way that all the players as well, and just really sell it to the media, especially. What are your thoughts on it?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? And for me, just before I go into Owen Morgan and the whole debate, I want him as captain. The fact is, Owen Morgan is England's greatest ever ODI and T20 leader. He's an absolute genius. He really is. He's up there with Mahendra Singh Dhoni for me and Kane Williamson in terms of recent leaders in white ball cricket. Now, for me, it is an interesting one because, again, it's completely up to Owen Morgan. You mentioned there rightfully, after the absolute shambles that was 2015, getting knocked out by Bangladesh at the Adelaide Oval. Still remember that quite clearly. Thank you very much, Rubel Hussain. I do remember that very clearly. 260 all out we were at the Adelaide Oval. Again, 6 years ago, still haven't let that go. But yeah, coming from the ashes and the embers of absolute shambles and embarrassment, national embarrassment as well, he rebuilt this side. So no matter what happens with regards to his decline, I do think there has been a decline in his batting, but that happens. The fact is, every single player, even the greatest, the Tendulkars, the Cooks, the Callises, the Dravids, the Pontings, everyone has their peak. And then there is a decline. And if this is the start of Owen Morgan's decline, it's just part and parcel of the game. We as England fans need to realise that. But with that being said, in white ball cricket, so in ODI and T20, I still think that there is a place for Owen Morgan as a leader. And I think a great example of this can be seen in the CPL with the St. Lucia Zouks and Darren Sammy. Now, I spoke on a podcast before the CPL started in 2020. I was speaking with Mashalene Santoki from the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, and they said Darren Sammy should be nowhere near the team because he's not contributing with the bat, he's not contributing with the ball. But I said he's contributing with his leadership. And at the end of the day, Darren Sammy, in the 11 for the entire tournament, led his side brilliantly and got them all the way to the final. So in white ball cricket, in T20s in particular, I do feel that Owen Morgan's leadership alone is almost an X factor for England. Even if he's not necessarily contributing 30, 40 runs every single game with the bats or fielding particularly well, that leadership, those sharp bowling rotations, the proactive team management per se, I think is absolutely vital and invaluable to English cricket. So for me, Owen Morgan, even though he is on a bit of a decline, and the stats say that, as you said, since that 2019 World Cup haven't been brilliant, he still commands a place in these England sides. And for me, the key thing with Morgan as well, it's his philosophy that underpins this entire team. Okay, this has come from Owen Morgan, Andrew Strauss, the national selectors, Ed Smith, etc. And they have created this team from absolutely nothing and taken them from zeros to heroes within the space of 4 years. So the issue that I would have if Morgan was to retire per se is could a Joe Root, a Ben Stokes, a Joss Butler, for example, maintain this for English cricket? And in my opinion, I'm not sure that they could, because this is Owen Morgan's philosophy. If you give the captaincy to Roots or Stokes or Butler, they'll put their own variations, their own twists on the captaincy, which may or may not work, but you're never ever going to be able to replicate Owen Morgan, the guile, the skill, the mastery of captaincy. It's a real art form. So for me, Faizan, Owen Morgan's the captain, even if he is declining, keep him in the side for as long as he deems fit.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. It's a weird one because you almost don't want, and he's not at that stage by any means, but you don't want it to get to a case like this where he's a passenger, but then also his leadership, as you said, is so invaluable. So then if it's invaluable, then you just say, well, okay, technically you could just have him at 7. He'll probably put himself at 7 and say, well, I can put myself at 7. And, like we're talking in a couple of years' time, I'd assume. And, but I'll lead the team and on the field as well, making the important decisions. And a good example, actually, and being the Pakistan fan that I am, is Imran Khan, right, in the 1992 World Cup. He was towards the end of his career. He pretty much didn't do much in that World Cup, really. But he led the side really well. And his philosophy and his kind of mentality led Pakistan to the World Cup win, really. But in terms of contribution with wickets and runs, it wasn't a huge amount from him. So maybe Morgan will have that similar effect. And I think at the moment, England are in a sweet spot, especially in white ball cricket, thanks to him. So they'll definitely have to give him as much time as I think probably he wants, really. I think he'll be on his terms. Lastly, on England front then, Sam Curran and I want to talk about Sam Curran. Obviously, a fantastic knock on 95. On the whole, though, he was a little bit disappointing for me. But as a Surrey fan, I know how good he can be. I mean, I remember watching him bowling at at 17, opening the bowling for Surrey at the Oval, and thinking, this kid is going to be really good. He's going to play for England. I remember saying he's definitely going to play for England. And he has, and I think he's just been he's definitely been bred that way, as in he's grown up like, you're definitely going to play for England. Surrey have definitely taken a liking to him. He's got this unbelievable talent that he seems to have. Probably didn't pick up the pace that I thought he would, but that probably is due to his height as well, and also his action. But he seems to have obviously developed his batting, which some people wouldn't have thought. Very good knock, but on the whole, I thought the series, apart from that knock, put that to one side, which is a bit harsh to do, didn't do too much in the ODIs, and we'll touch upon him in a bit in the T20, which I thought, again, is a little bit disappointing. We talked about Chris Woakes, right, how important he is. And for me, if you're picking an England ODI side, it's really between Sam Curran and Chris Woakes. I don't think you have room for both, because Ben Stokes is that second seam all-rounder. So my question to you is, some people are saying Chris Woakes is going to be sweating. For me, I think Chris Woakes just slots in straight away. And I think Sam Curran, this is a good sign. It's a kind of coming of age, a little bit of maturity to say, actually, you know what? I can do it at this stage. He'll be in and around the side still, and he'll get his chances when they're rotating. But he's more of a long-term prospect. Do you agree?
100%. I can't really disagree. Obviously, I'm a massive Chris Woakes fan. And for me, the way in which he's been well treated on this entire tour has been less than exemplary, to say the least. Yeah. But for me, Sam Curran, he's got so many years. He really has. It's not a case of competition between him and Chris Woakes at the moment. Chris Woakes, for me, is in the peak of his powers. You mentioned the 2019 World Cup. He was England's second leading wicket taker. Absolutely brilliant with the new ball. Just destroyed opening partnerships. I was there for the 2019 semi-final when he got David Warner at Edgbaston. Like, that's what Chris Woakes does. He delivers magic. He did the exact same thing against Australia in the summer. He produces these brilliant knocks. Think back to 2016 against Sri Lanka and the 95 at Trent Bridge alongside Liam Plunkett. So for me, at the moment, Chris Woakes is our number 7 or number 8, depending on the batting lineup. He is that second seam all-rounder. With that being said, though, I know Sam Curran, I understand your point. I think he averaged around about 68, 70 in this particular ODI series with the ball. I don't think he's ready just yet to become a starter in every single series. But with that being said, that final knock that we saw, that 95 not out, should have got another single, though, to make it 96, would have been the highest ever ODI number 8 score. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But what we've seen from Sam Curran in and around every single different format is the sheer promise, potential, and ceiling that this guy's got. And I think it's incredibly high. So for the time being, I'll stick with Chris Woakes, of course. Got to stick with my local boy. I'm a Warwickshire fan at the end of the day, but Sam Curran, what a prospect. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of him in an England shirt over the next few years.
Yeah, I agree. I think the potential is definitely there for sure from Sam Curran. He's shown it in glimpses, hasn't he? I think he's only 22, so he's got a long way left yet. But yeah, Chris Woakes is just he's invaluable, really. I think in that ODI side for sure. On India, then they obviously won. They're all happy. All the Indian fans, telling me clean sweep, and I'm like, no, fine, fair enough. Good for them. Let's start at the top of the order. So Rohit Sharma, we know he's probably one of the best white ball players, ODI players of all time. Really, I think it's safe to say. Didn't have the best series, but I don't want to talk about him too much because I think we know how good he is. And really, there's not too much to talk about for him. Shikhar Dhawan, though, he was really impressive, I think, for me. Not necessarily the best to watch, but, well, for me personally anyway, doesn't seem to have the ability to play in T20s, but ODI seems to be this sweet spot where you can go between a 90 to 100 strike rate, and he seems so comfortable within it. And he just looked at home, really. And again, actually outperforming, and just got 169 runs at an average of only 36. But to be fair, that was one bad innings, but the other two that he played, I think, just showed his class really there. And I think he's pretty invaluable to them. There were a lot of question marks around him going into the ODI series just because he hasn't done one in T20s, but surely he is just a nailed on. Him and Rohit Sharma are nailed on for India. And I guess this feeds quite nicely, though, into the philosophy that India employ, which you will know that England are very gung-ho for the first 10. And when I say gung-ho, they're going at 7s, 8s at sometimes they will go at 7 and 8s and over for the first 10. Roy Bairstow blitzing people away, for the most part anyway. Now, India employed a very different tactic for the first 2 games. They were going, I think they were 39 for 1 in the first game, and then it was 40 for 0 in the second. So they were going at 4s. I actually said on my review, if they can just tweak that in the first 10, even go to 5.5, they will be able to push towards that 350 mark. They went even more and went to 65 for naught. Really fantastic start. There's obviously been a tweak in philosophy after England chasing that second ODI and got that 300 plus score, which they thought was probably enough. I think it was 337 in the end. It was. Are we going to see a change in philosophy from India now going forward?
That is a great question. And in my opinion, I'm not sure that we will. Because although you said there 65 for none and they got off to a blistering start, it's a brilliant partnership, wasn't it? 100 for none within the first 14 overs. Let's see how the actual innings ebbed and flowed. Because 100 for none, then it was 128 for 4, then it was 256 for 4, and then it was 329 all out. So it's very much a roller coaster. It fluctuated all over the place. And for me, the innings never really had this constant momentum. It was a constant case of start well, rebuild, start well, go well again, I suppose, and then collapse. For me, there just wasn't this constant flow that we've seen so many times in Indian ODI cricket. And I know there has been a lot of talk about obviously the approach, saying that should we try and implement England's approach? In my opinion, that depends on those Indian players. If they think that they can go out there consistently every single match, do a Bairstow and Roy, get 60, 70, 80 runs, try and go for it. But if it doesn't work, go back to the approach that has worked so well for India. Let's not forget 2019. Yes, they had an absolute disaster in the semi-final, but they finished top of the table. Okay, so it's obviously an approach that works. It's an approach that wins them ODI games. They've won this series. At the end of the day, they have the bowling capabilities to defend totals. So for me, I don't think that they can do a like for like. I don't think it's as simple as going, Roy and Bairstow can do that. So Shikhar and Rohit, you go out there, do the exact same thing, and we're going to just copy England. And I know that from experience because England tried doing that in 2015. We tried to copy Australia. We didn't have the same caliber of talent. I'm not saying that India's batsmen aren't as talented at all. I'm just saying that you have to actually manipulate your approach depending on that batting lineup. So for me, I don't think the approach will change long term. The only thing that I think with India at the moment is the personnel. I feel like they keep on chopping and changing. They just need stability. We saw that in the World Cup, for example. They brought in Vijay Shankar. They're thinking of bringing in Ambati Rayudu beforehand as well. They need a solid and dependable top 6, top 7, just as England. And another real important thing as well, which was touched upon the other day, was if you look at the great Indian teams, which had the Tendulkars, the Sehwags, the Yuvraj Singhs, for example, they had batsmen who could also bowl a couple of overs. And it just really complemented the balance of the side really nicely. So that's something I think India could do in the future. Whether or not we'll see Rohit Sharma bowling the off spin, does have a couple of IPL hat tricks, who knows? Only time will tell. But I think that's the real issue for India. I don't think it's the approach. I think it's the overall balance of the side as opposed to the mentality.
That's interesting. I've got a slightly different view to you. I agree with you in the sense that they shouldn't employ and try and copy England because I think that's the wrong way to go. I think, as you said, you need to have exactly the same personnel. You need to play to your strengths. One thing I would say is that for me, India have this really similar to England, I guess, this strength and depth and talent and plethora of talent really at their disposal that to me, especially we saw in the T20 series that they can score quickly. To me, it's just a case of a slight tweak. And it's weird because you definitely hit the nail on the head and said it was a roller coaster, that third ODI. But to me, it was a case of the first 10, I thought they did quite well. And what they've been really good at and in the past and also in the first 2 ODIs is the last 10 going big, right? So for me, it was if they can just go slightly quicker in the first 10, play in the middle how they normally do, because they've got Kohli there normally, or whoever else. KL Rahul had a fantastic series after having a pretty poor T20 series. And kind of showed his worth, I guess. He's got an average of 46. So for me, he was a certain and I guess repaid that faith that India showed. And then in the last 10, if they can go big as they do with your Hardik Pandyas, with your Rishabh Pants, I think the issue for them was that they lost wickets regularly. And for me, it was okay. I looked at it and said, is it a case that maybe it's the new philosophy or a slight tweak that's caused that and how they've thrown their wickets away? But then I looked at it and I said, actually, what was it? Really, the main kind of points for me were the 2 wickets that Adil Rashid got, which was Rohit Sharma and Shikhar Dhawan. So very quick succession, and I think it was 3 over gap. And then Moeen Ali got Virat Kohli with a good delivery as well. That turned a lot more than he expected. And he looked completely aghast, as always, whilst getting out to Moeen Ali. Fun little fact as well, because I know that you love a stat, is that Moeen and Rashid have both got Virat Kohli out. I think it's 9 times each. In white ball cricket, and the only person to do it more is Tim Southey. So all the Indian fans watching will hate me for saying this, but I think it's safe to say he's a little bit of a bunny for Rashid and Moeen Ali and the two spinners. But for me, it was more a case of that England got them out with pretty good balls, but 8 times out of 10, the fact that maybe didn't go quite according to plan, they still got, what was it, 329?
Yep.
Then going forward, if it goes slightly more to plan, they're going to be getting that 350 quite easily. And that's really where I was trying to go with, rather than having to really expect themselves to, we have to go completely gung-ho and put all your eggs in one basket for the last 10. That's kind of my view on it. And I think I can tell you've got a slightly different view on it. And I think lots of people have varying views on it. Because I just think India played such a certain way for a number of years. But going forward to that 2023 World Cup, I'll just be very surprised. And it's a really controversial opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway. I would be surprised if they employ the old tactics that they have been, but they go into that World Cup and they win it. They might win it on talent alone, because that's how talented this Indian side is. But I just think in terms of philosophy, England have it right in terms of the kind of the way they're going. India, I think, need to find their different version of it for sure. I don't think it can be the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, that's the way to go forward. I don't know. We'll see, won't we? We'll see.
We'll have to wait and see what Ravi Shastri and the think tank come up with, won't we?
Yeah, I mean, India, they'll experiment, I'm sure. But Neshwar Kumar is so good though for India, isn't he? Yeah. We mentioned it, and he's come out from injury, and he just started off from where he left. And I remember watching him and thinking he was quite slow. I think he started off when he was like 120 k's. He's gone up to like 135 now, and he's still swinging the ball around in Indian conditions, subcontinent with the white ball, both ways. Gets a bit of nip off the seam as well. And I'm thinking to myself, this is just incredible to watch. And I'm Pakistani, but I'm saying actually, I really love watching him bowl, which is a surprise, right? Probably for most people. And he is just someone that I think he's a complete nightmare to face and probably underrated. What did you think of him?
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And something else, I just want to throw a quick stat out there in case there's any IPL fans. I did a bit of an analysis into Bhuvaneshwar Kumar's power play stats. His economy in the IPL power play is 5.72 runs and over. I mean, it's staggering. It's staggering. The level of skill and guile. I said it earlier, I can list so many adjectives and superlatives, and none of them would really describe my feelings of just how good an in-form, on-rhythm, on-song Bhuvaneshwar Kumar is. He's absolutely unstoppable. In this series, his economy rate is 4.65. Now, in comparison to other Indian seamers, Shardul Thakur, I think, had a good series as well, but 6.72. You look at Nasarajan and Krishna, there was pushing about 7 runs and over as well. I mean, Bhuvaneshwar Kumar is an absolutely brilliant weapon for India to have in their arsenal in T20 and ODI cricket. He's absolutely brilliant. And this series just showcased the best of Bhuvaneshwar Kumar. There was so much skill, the swing that he's able to generate. That first over the Jason Roy, I know it went for 14, but that last delivery was textbook. The wrist position was absolutely immaculate. Yeah. The little nip off the seam and the late swing as well. I know this was against England, but I was just sat there. Yeah. I wanted about 10, 15 replays of that. It's perfection in terms of seam bowling with a white ball. So yeah, Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, in one word, outstanding. Had an absolutely amazing series.
Yeah, he's incredible, isn't he? It's funny, I think it's Michael Atherton said that the best swing bowlers, they get backspin almost off the seam because of the flick of the wrist. And the best, the ones that have the most control, and he's one of them that does, for sure. Shardul Thakur, as you said, he had a very good kind of white ball series on the whole, I think. He was pretty impressive for me. And it's funny because I remember seeing him in the T20s and I just thought, I don't really rate him. I just thought, I don't know why, my initial thought was he looks quite average, if I'm being honest with you. But then he just seems to have this knack of getting wickets in the middle overs and just getting big wickets. And it just kept on happening. And it's almost like he's going to be a staple in the Indian side. What are your thoughts?
Well, it is an interesting one. And let's face it, India have got a brilliant seam attack. No matter who they go with, you got Mohammad Shami as well, who didn't play in this series. Jasprit Bumrah. The options are absolutely limitless. And I suppose if you're an India fan at the moment, you must be feeling pretty confident, no matter what format, because with good seamers alongside a world-class spin attack, yeah, you're always going to have a very good bowling lineup in subcontinental conditions. But for me, as you said, these key wickets that he was taking, breaking partnerships, and I thought in particular against left-handers, he was absolutely brilliant with the change of pace, the cutters into the surface. I think he had a very, very strong series. The only thing that I will say, again, at times a bit erratic. So if you look at Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, for example, He chooses a line and length and he just bowls on the channel again, changing the wrist position, trying to generate swing, where Shardul Thakur searches for wickets at times. And that, to me, does come at a detriment sometimes. It does mean that he bowls in the slot and he gets hit for fours or sixes. But it is so valuable to have a guy like that. Look at the 2019 World Cup, for example, in England with Plunkett. Now, Plunkett, probably a lot of people on paper would have looked at that. They would have thought Wood, Archer, Woke, Stokes, and then you got Plunkett. Well, we're going to go after Plunkett. It's exactly what teams did, and he had a knack of picking up wickets. So Shardul Thakur, for me, even though he's not the most economical, sometimes in white ball cricket, it's better to have a wicket taker who is that just a little bit more expensive. So for me, I think if India persists with him, could be a very useful option heading into the future.
Yeah, I agree. He's got a natural waist swing, but good off cutters, and yeah, he's a bit erratic. I think it's funny because most bowlers you'd assume are better in the middle overs rather than the death, but he seems to be more comfortable at the death and actually seems to pick up more wickets or be more economical, which is crazy to think about. But India have got a few bowlers like that, and one of them is Prasidh, who's new for India anyway, and he came in, and so did Krunal Pandya, Hardik Pandya's older bro. He came in and fireworks in his first match.
Yep.
Got a bit of tap with his left arm spin, but he's almost the he would be a like for like replacement for someone like Jadeja, right? Who I think will slot back in. What were your thoughts with Prasidh obviously bowling kind of upwards of 145 Ks and at times looked good, but also got slapped a bit as well, to be fair. Kind of mixed bag. What were your thoughts on the two?
Well, it is, and I'll start with Prasidh Krishna because I'm an RCB fan, and of course I do like Karnataka as well. Just get that out there. They are my state team in Indian cricket, and he does play for the boys at the Chinnaswamy. I thought he was pretty impressive, to be honest. That Yorker to Butler, I know they ended up losing, but that was a brilliant piece of bowling. It really was, and you could just tell by the look of Joss's face. I mean, he almost appreciated just how good the bowling was. So for me, at times, again, erratic. But what was it? 3 games that he played? His first 3 ODIs. He's in an India shirt, the pressure on his shoulders. It's bound to happen. You can't always have a dream debut. You can't get a 5 for and have an economy rate below 5. So for me, I don't think it's fair to judge him on this one series. But let's say that India do need that little bit of extra zip, the X factor in a country like South Africa, for example. He could be very useful. And we didn't really see his short ball, but he's got a pretty mean short ball as well when there's a bit of assistance in the surface. So for me, Prasidh Krishna maybe didn't have the greatest of series economic wise, but he took 6 wickets, India's second leading wicket taker alongside Bhuvi, and I thought at times very impressive. Now, with regards to Krunal, of course, we have to touch upon that knock. Absolutely brutal. The way in which he dispatched Tom Curran so disdainfully was very impressive to see, and of course, had that lovely touching tribute to his late dad. The only thing that I will say, as you rightfully said there, Faizan, I don't think he's a starter in any shape or form because you've got Ravindra Jadeja, the very essence of a 3-dimensional cricketer. Gun bowler, great batsman, and one of the greatest, if not the greatest fielders on the planet right now. So with Krunal, at times impressive. With the bowling, didn't really impress me, I'm going to be honest. He just fires in arm ball after arm ball after arm ball. And we've seen in international cricket, you can be very successful. You'll know this firsthand, Faizan. Imad Wasim is absolutely brilliant. He fires in the Yorkers and the arm balls to perfection. But the problem with Krunal, his line and length was all over the place. So it was arm balls, but he wasn't trying to get any spin. And it was just going into Ben Stokes' slot and bang, 6, and see you later, son. It was as simple as that. So Krunal, I think, is a bit hot and cold. But again, is he going to be a starter? Probably not. So maybe not the worst thing for India heading into the future.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think his bowling was a little bit one-dimensional. You've got to be super accurate if you're going to bowl that quickly and flat. And unfortunately, he bowled into Stokes' arc, as you rightfully pointed out. But that display of the bat, I think, showed promise. And then he just kind of tailed off in the last ODI, looked a bit stuck on the crease. But surely, he clearly has talent. Interesting, maybe he'll get into the T20 side, because I know he's a good T20 player as well. So maybe that's more an avenue for him to go down, potentially, because I know, again, I don't follow the IPL as closely as some others, but I know he plays for Mumbai Indians and bats above Hardik Pandya. So, yeah, for them. So I know that he's a pretty talented player, which leads me quite nicely onto the T20 series. Look at that, beautifully done. Nice segue. So the T20I series, obviously India again edging it, that one 3-2. England were actually 2-1 up, and I think we can safely say they bottled it in that fourth T20 when they set the platform with the openers, and that was a collapse of the middle order of epic proportions. Let's be honest. The first thing I wanted to touch upon was the difference between the two teams was England stuck with pretty much the same team throughout the whole series, apart from one change which was enforced, when Mark Wood bruised his, I think it was his heel in the first T20. So second one, Tom Curran played. Apart from that, Mark Wood came back in unchanged. For India, they chopped and changed, and it worked. So I feel like India got more out of it in terms of learnings and knowing, okay, this is what the team we want. Also, to be fair, they don't have any more T20s up until the World Cup, from what I know. It's just the IPL, whereas England do. So I guess they didn't need to experiment maybe as much. But considering that it was perfect conditions, the World Cup is going to be in India, I'm surprised they didn't tweak a little bit more. What are your thoughts?
Exactly the same. I think obviously India won the series as well, but they gained so much more from it. I feel like with England, very one-dimensional, of course, not just with the squad selection, but also at times with the bowling plans. It was very, very un-England-like. It was a very strange series, to be honest, in that regard. And I think it's going to be a massive, massive opportunity lost because we had some great young players over there. First and foremost being Matt Parkinson, the Lancashire leg spinner. I know that Adil Rashid, of course, brilliant, had a pretty strong series in that T20. I had that brilliant ball to Virat Kohli, didn't he? The stumping by Joss Butler. But for me, with Adil Rashid, I mean, you can afford to give him a rest at some point. And we had Matt Parkinson. We know his calibre and quality. We've seen it so many times for the Lightning in the T20 Blast. So I just think England should have made a few more changes. I'm not saying wholesale changes per se, but as I said, Parkinson would have been one. And then another one which I would have liked to have seen is with Ben Stokes, just batting slightly higher up the order. Why not give it a shot? We've got absolutely nothing to lose. Let's face it, it's not like the tests where there's test championship points. Our place in the final was theoretically up for grabs in that series. It's not like the ODI where we've got Super League points. There's no points in offering this. It doesn't really matter. We could have lost 5-0. But if we would have learned stuff, they would have still been valuable heading into the next T20 World Cup. So for me, a massive, massive opportunity missed. I think India got it spot on, giving young guys this opportunity. Ishan Kishan in particular. I know we'll talk about him and Suryakumar Yadav. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Also very clever from Virat Kohli to make them capped, makes them available for the mega auction next year in the IPL for RCB. So good work from Virat and, and Ravi Shastri there. But yeah, overall, I feel like India got it spot on in terms of giving these youngsters a chance and England got it wrong. I feel like we're a bit too stuck in our old ways per se.
Yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it? I thought it was very, very strange. Yeah, the Rashid thing's interesting because he clearly is England's best spinner in white ball cricket, and it will go down as one of, in my opinion, one of their greatest ever spinners in white ball cricket for sure. But you can afford, as you said, to give him a rest. And if you lose the match, you lose the match. But Matt Parkinson, it's good experience for him to come in and see what he can do. Liam Livingston as well was in the squad. Why not just bring him in? And this, I'm a big Moeen Ali fan, and this really did irk me because they sent him home, and we'll touch upon it in the test matches, which is fine because that's scheduled. But then to bring him back and then not play him in a single T20 to me was crazy when you're in India. And in my opinion, the team that's going to win the T20 World Cup this year, and I could be wrong, they're going to play two spinners. I'd be very surprised if a team plays one spinner and they win the World Cup in India. We'll see, but I would be surprised. And I think Sam Curran got in there because of his IPL performances for Chennai Super Kings, from what I know. But I'm pretty sure he's opening the batting there, so it's a very different kettle of fish. And for me, he underperformed. And again, I'm a big fan of Sam Curran, but the first 2-3 matches he didn't perform well. And at that point, I think England should have said we should probably, rest you, and Moeen can come back in. I personally would have gone Moeen at the start anyway. But again, I think the biggest thing was the fact that they went with the same team, and it just got a bit stale after a while. And it was one pace, and India just were very, very comfortable, I think, facing it. What are your thoughts on, I guess, England only playing one spinner as well? And Sam Curran, do you think he's an option, or is it again a case of it's a little too early for him?
Well, it's an interesting one. And for me, I think we got the selection of Sam Curran completely wrong. Because if you actually have a look at the stats, Sam Curran bowled less overs in that T20I series than Ben Stokes. And he also didn't bowl with the new ball, which was something which he had done so well alongside Deepak Chahar in the IPL for CSK. So that was a bit baffling. And I agree with you, Faizan. I would have played Moeen Ali. The fact is, I know a lot of people saying he's not in the greatest form, this, that, the other. But in IPL, for example, he has the 7th highest strike rate in IPL history. So he obviously has the ability and the capabilities to strike a cricket ball very cleanly. If you look at his strike rate since the 1st of January 2019 as well, for England in T20Is, his strike rate's 168. It's better than Ben Stokes, who has one of 157. So why not have given Moeen a chance? Again, why not change something up? The only thing that I will say there, though, and again, this could be a problem for England cropping up in the World Cup against right arm off spin, for example. You look at that middle order, and you've got Stokes, Morgan, Curran, Ali. There's not really a lot of difference. I feel like we could do with a right-hander just to break it up slightly, because all teams need to do, as we saw with Shardle Tackle, bowl across the line, because all of England's T20I batsmen, for some reason, love hitting across. We don't really have many offside shots on display in this series. And they could just go to right arm off spin, get the ball spinning both ways, and we could be in trouble. So for me, I feel like Sam Curran, he shouldn't have played all 5 games, especially, and the way in which he batted as well. They're batting him at 8 and 9. And as you said, he'd been pinch hitting for CSK, he'd been batting in the top 6 at times as well. And we're batting him below Jofra Archer. Like, what's the point in that?
So I
So
think
for me,
he batted, what was it, at like 7 or 8, I think, in the first 4, and then the last one they put him
batted
at
9.
9. Yeah, which is crazy. It was almost like when he went in, I felt sorry for him in a way, because I was like, it clearly is a lack of faith in your batting, but we'll play you anyway, but we'll shunt you down to 9. And I think he bowled like an over in that match. So I was like, he may as well not turned up. It was just crazy to think about.
It was. And this is the thing with Sam Curran. I feel like in T20I cricket in particular, you really need a specific niche. And Sam Curran, the way in which he's been so successful for Kings 11 in 2019 and CSK in 2020 was by having that defined role. He's 22, he's a young cricketer, he needs clarity. Okay. And in the IPL, under the leadership of MS Dhoni, he was opening with a new ball. Sam, do that. Maybe bowl a few at the death as well if we need you alongside Shardle. And as we said, bat in the top 6, go up there, express yourself with the bats. With England, I don't see him being a regular fixture until we give him a bit of a confidence boost or a bit of faith with the new ball. That is Sam Curran's perfect, ideal scenario. Open up, get swing. We saw that with the dismissal of Kara Hall in the first T20I in Ahmedabad. And then from then on, it was a case of him bowling 2 overs per game in the middle overs and not coming into bat. So again, I think that's on England. I feel like we misused him. And as I said, I think we could have used Livingston or Moeen Ali as a better option in this particular series.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a case of, unfortunately, at the moment, I think the makeup of the England side, you have Wood and Archer opening in T20s now, and that's what they want to go with. And I kind of don't blame them, because they can blow people away at the start. But yeah, if Sam Curran's going to play, I think he has to open. So if he's not, then you just say, well, okay, your time will come, but just not at the moment. And then Moeen Ali, I think the one thing I'd say about him, and it's a really interesting point, because I think Nasser Hussain made a really good point, which is he's one of England's best 6 hitters in terms of hitting it effortlessly. If you look at someone like Buttler, you've got Buttler, Roy, Stokes, and I guess Morgan as well, and Bairstow. But I think Moeen Ali's in there, right? Like when I say he's in there, he's amongst that large group. But he's someone who, I think, lower down the order, if you're not going to have Buttler finishing, then who else is going to do it? And I think this is the issue that England have got, and that leads me nicely onto the conundrum, which I've got very weird views on this, which I don't think most people agree with me on it. But there's this whole issue with Buttler and Roy opening. Best, obviously, they shunted him down to 4. I did feel a bit sorry for him, because he was performing well with Roy. Buttler was obviously a floater before and was seen as the ultimate finisher. But then England thought, we'll put you up and open because we want our perceived best player, which I can see why he's their best player, facing the most amount of deliveries at the top. He hasn't performed badly. I think he's performed really well. I think he averages, 48 opening? Maybe hasn't been, for me, as explosive as he has when he's been a finisher. But I think the issue for me is that England are missing a finisher now. And that is missing from the team. I think the makeup is now askew. And it's not quite right. And they're struggling to know what to do there. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, that's a great question. And it is one which sprung up on numerous occasions, not just in this series as well. I thought against Australia in the summer at times as well, struggled to finish off an innings. For me, I think you do have to go Ali, or if not, you have to trust Sam Curran, because these two can finish an innings. They are 2 of England's pocket dynamos, per se, in the lower to middle order. With Buttler, I like him opening. I actually really like him and Roy opening. I love it. I think it's brilliant. Jos Buttler's done nothing wrong. He was brilliant in the Australia T20 series, decent against Pakistan, and of course, excellent in South Africa and in this series as well. So for me, Jos Buttler, keep him opening. I like him as an opener. That's just my personal opinion. I like the dynamic of innovation, enterprise with Jos Buttler, with Bruce, power hitting, strength, power, just from Jason Roy. With regards to the finisher, though, again, Ben Stokes isn't a finisher. And this is something which I don't think many people realise. But if you look at his stats, I mentioned earlier 157. That's his overs 16 to 20 strike rate, so at the death, which sounds okay. That sounds okay. He's striking at nearly 160. But when you compare it to Andre Russell, for example, from the West Indies, who has over 200, Hardik Pandya, who exceeds 190, Colin de Grandhomme from New Zealand, who exceeds 190 as well, it pales in comparison. Now, in comparison to Moeen Ali at the death, his is over 170. So for me, Moeen Ali has to slot in there somewhere. Even if you're not going to trust him to bowl his allocated 4 overs every single game, if you think he's too expensive, fair enough. But just give him the responsibility to finish an innings. That's my personal view. He can do that. He's done it for RCB in the past. He's done it for Worcestershire. He's done it for England as well. Let's not forget. Did it against Pakistan last summer. So for me, I would trust Moeen Ali. He'd be my finisher in the team. And if not, bring in Sam Curran and give him some faith in the new ball as well in the power play.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they're going to go with Butler at the top, then yeah, I think I'd go with Moeen Ali definitely to finish it off. I've got a very different opinion, as you can probably imagine, which is I think that they should go Roy and Bairstow at the top, and it's a very unpopular opinion, and the reason why I say it, and it is a very difficult one, because I think, as you said, Butler, he averages 48. It's really difficult to say he shouldn't be opening. I just think if you want to do what's best for the team as a whole, I think Bairstow gives you enough as an opener. I think he's very underrated as a T20 opener. And I know it's different format, ODIs, but I think he's shown enough in the T20s to say that actually him and Roy can do it at the top. And I feel like he's less shackled than Butler at the top. I know it sounds really strange to say about Jos Butler, but I feel like Jos Butler knows that there's more value on his wicket at the top. And we will see innings like we did against India where he will go big. But there's also innings where he'll go slowly at the start, and it's almost like he's not quite there, and he doesn't want to go like kind of 1 to 100 like that. He's going through the gears, shifting through them, and he's like, okay, I'm not feeling 100%, so I'm not going to go kind of hell for leather. Whereas when he comes in as a floater, he's got that license to say, go on, do whatever you want, which I'm sure Morgan already says to him opening, but I think subconsciously he doesn't do it. And that's kind of where I am with it. But I mean, it's kind of by the way. I think they're definitely going to go with Butler opening long term. I think that's there's no point. I guess at some point it will become a redundant conversation, because I don't think once he plays another series or 2 opening, I don't think there's any point in discussing it. But yeah, I think Moeen Ali to finish. I just feel like Butler is the best finisher around. I genuinely do, and I thought that for a very long time. So that's why I feel like they're missing it. But I think Moeen is second best. That leads me nicely onto the number 3 conundrum. Well, I say it's a conundrum, but is it?
It isn't.
Because you know what? I agree with you. It's not. But I then listened to Kevin Peterson, who can be very persuasive, and he said Dawud Malan is fantastic in England, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. These kind of surfaces where it comes on, and I think you saw, he loves playing, especially the seamers down towards that third man region using the pace. He said he's found after playing the the Legends series that hitting 6 in the middle overs is not easy, and he thinks maybe Dawud Malan doesn't quite have that explosiveness that he's looking for. So he would actually go with Butler and Roy, but Bairstow at 3. But I think he's mates with Bairstow, so maybe I'll take it with a pinch of salt. But with Malan, I think, look, he averages 50, and I think it's a bit unfair on him that there's this scrutiny on him, because the first time he's playing in India, right, he scored in the last one. I know it was a flatter deck, but he still scored a hell of a lot of runs in the last one. Yes, he struggled, but you can't expect someone to just come in, even if he is the number 1 T20 batsman, ranked-wise anyway, in the world, to just come in and kind of hit the ground running straight away. It's difficult. He's still got a whole IPL left, and he'll have other T20s as well to play for England. I think if he has a good IPL, normally, and you probably wouldn't, because I know you're a huge IPL fan,
yeah.
I would normally say that the IPL doesn't have too much relevance to some of the world. Like next year in Australia, I personally don't think it has as much relevance because of the conditions, the different conditions. This year, I think it's got a lot of relevance because it's exactly the same conditions. People can definitely use that as a gauge. And Dawud Malan is another example. He's playing for, I think, Kings 11 Punjab, isn't it?
Yep, Punjab Kings.
Yeah, so let's see how he does there. If he performs well there, it's a good experience, but I would say you have to keep faith with him. If his name was Ben Stokes or Jos Butler, there wouldn't even be this question. I genuinely think that. But because his name's Dawud Malan and he doesn't have this kind of aura around him and this kind of fanfare around him, people think, actually, no, he's dispensable, and I disagree. So what do you think, Malan? I think you from what I can see, you're going to say Malan 100%. There's also murmurings about Hales. So I'm going to ask you about Hales as well and say, would you put Hales in there? Or do you think even Hales should be in the squad come the T20 World Cup is another question.
Well, we'll start with Alex Hales. Why not? We'll get into the juicy bit first because I do have an opinion about Alex Hales. And for me, I know what he did. The relationship with Morgan, I don't think is fully repaired. But the fact is, at some point, Alex Hales needs an answer. He needs an answer from Chris Silverwood. He needs an answer from Ashley Giles. He needs an answer from Owen Morgan as to whether or not he's going to be playing for England again. Because we need to know as fans as well. It's so tiring to keep on bringing up Alex Hales' name when he's not getting into the squad or when we think he should be in the squad and he's not. We need answers, as does Alex Hales himself. So for me, if it was up to me, and it isn't, it's up to Owen Morgan. And again, Owen Morgan has earned this right. He has created this team from the ground up. I think he should be in the squad. I don't think he should be in the starting 11, but in the squad. Because let's say Royal, Bairstow, or Butler got injured, and we need a top order batsman who has the ability to take a game away from the opposition. Alex Hales can do that. He's the Big Bash's leading run scorer. I know he doesn't have an IPL contract, but he's been brilliant for Notts. He's brilliant for England whenever he needed him as well. Think back to Trent Bridge in 2018 against Australia. Absolutely marvellous. So for me, Alex Hales commands a place in the squad. Not necessarily the starting 11, of course, he'll have to work his way up, but I think definitely should be in contention in the wider squad itself. So that's my thoughts on Alex Hales. With regards to Dawid Malan, I just want to start off by saying, who's the fastest ever batsman in T20I cricket to score 1,000 runs?
I'm
That would
assuming
be
it's
my
Dawid Malan.
argument. It is Dawid Malan. It's not Babar Azam. It's not Virat Kohli. It's not Brendan McCullum. It's nobody else in the world. It is Dawid Malan who did it in 24 innings. And the fact is, this whole conversation about him and Bairstow, if we want to look at that in a bit more depth, I have actually got the stats. Of course, I've got the stats. This is since the 1st of January 2019. Dawid Malan has scored 753 runs. Bairstow scored 654. If we look at their strike rates, which has always been a massive thing with Dawid Malan, people saying he's too slow, this, that, the other. He has a strike of 142.34. Okay, compare that to Johnny Bairstow, fair enough. Bairstow has a 148.97. But Milan's average is 50.2, Bairstow's is 32.7. So there's a massive, massive gap there in terms of volume of runs and in terms of match-winning knocks as well. If we look at match-winning knocks, think back to South Africa, the knock in Boland Park, the 99 out at Newlands. We go back to the New Zealand series in 2019, and he blew away the Black Caps at McLean Park. And it was a Napier as well, a Hamilton. It's one of those two. Had some fantastic knocks in that series. And in this series, I know he didn't have the greatest of series by any means, but that last game to me was a redemption tale. It really was. There was so much scrutiny, so much pressure, all the media piling on saying he's not good enough to be England's number 3, this, that, the other, because he had scored 80 from 77 balls in the previous 4 games. And that for me just showed the calibre of Dawid Malan, not just in terms of as a batsman, but as a man. The amount of mental fortitude that he showed in that particular innings said to me that he is an England number 3. It's as simple as that. Series opener, pressure, the series is on the line, and he produces that. It was arguably the second best knock in that game from an English perspective alongside Joss Butler. And another key thing, you mentioned there about stature and reputation, fanfare per se. I think that does cloud our perception of Dawid Malan. Because if we look at fours hit as well, I go back to the whole Bairstow debate. He's hit 18 more fours than Johnny Bairstow, and yet only struck 5 less sixes. So he's actually scored more boundaries. And if you look at his boundary percentage, it's 63%. Johnny Bairstow's is only 65.7. So although Bairstow's is bigger, it's not a lot. It's not a massive difference. And again, we could go into dot ball percentages. I could give you every single stat. And the stats are saying Dawid Malan is a brilliant number 3 batsman. So for me, only England could even contemplate dropping the number 1 batsman in the world, the fastest man to 1,000 T20I runs. So for me, I would keep him. The only issue for Dawid Malan heading into this next World Cup, you mentioned there about the Punjab Kings. I don't think he's going to get many games. I'm going to be honest, because the Punjab Kings have 2 set batsmen in their top 4 in Chris Gale, the universe boss. They have Nicholas Pooran, and then in terms of their bowling, they brought in Riley Meredith and Jai Richardson. So it's going to be tremendously hard for him to get a run of games for Punjab in the IPL unless they really, really struggle. And I don't think that's going to happen with that top 4. That's usually their strongest asset in the Indian Premier League. So it's an interesting one. If it was me, and of course it's not up to me, but if it was me, he's at number 3. It's as simple as that. If you want to bring Ben Stokes up, bring him up to number 4 and have Johnny Bairstow as a spin hitter, because Ben Stokes' best attribute in T20 is when he comes in the power play. He's got 2 IPL centuries, both have come in the power play, one batting at 1, the other one batting at 5. Why not put him at number 4 then? But I don't think Dawid Malan is the root issue of England's problems. I just almost feel like he's the one that everyone piles the pressure on because he's not a World Cup winner. And I don't think we should do that, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit of a scapegoat. I 100% agree with you. In fact, I was completely outraged actually at the start that people were even talking about it. I just said, how can they even be discussing it considering he's number one T20 bats? I just thought it was incredible to even bring it up, to be honest with you. But it just seemed to be a thing that, on Sky they're talking about it a lot as well. And I just thought I didn't know why. But after you hear something enough and you just think, oh, sure, well, maybe that is a discussion topic. You know what I mean? It's interesting you said about the IPL as well, because Mr. Universe Boss has kind of revolutionized himself at number 3. It seems at the PSL he was batting there as well, and he seems to be batting quite well there, which would be Dawid Malan's position. So interesting to see if he will get any games. I hope he does, because he's one, it'll be good practice for the T20 World Cup, and 2, just good experience overall. And I think he needs games. From an Indian point of view, they chopped and changed, as we said. Let's start with Ishan Kishan, because I know you seem like a big fan of his. On debut, right, came in and let's say bludgeoned his way to 50 in let's say next to no time. Really, really impressive stuff from him, and he looks like one for the future, doesn't he?
Oh, he is. He is. I've seen Ishan Kishan for a number of years now, and for anyone who does have Netflix, brilliant documentary, 2018 Cricket Fever. You can actually see him and his family in Bihar. It's a great, great story. And Ishan Kishan, I remember him in 2017 playing for the Gujarat Lions, because obviously CSK and Rajasthan were banned back then. And I remember looking at him and thought, this guy's got some potential. I didn't actually realise that he had this much potential to become a match winner. But I thought, okay, he's pretty innovative. He's a little bit unorthodox, a little bit of a hint of Rishabh Pant sprinkled in there per se. But my word, ever since joining the Mumbai Indians, his career has just gone from strength to strength to strength. And this is a testament to his character as well. To go out there, let's not forget this was in front of fans as well. This wasn't behind closed doors. You're going in front of 67,000 people in the world's largest cricket stadium, this colossal coliseum of cricket. And he produces that. It was absolutely magnificent. It was a legendary debut, in my opinion. He really announced himself, not only to Indian fans who'd been seeing him for so many years in the IPL performing for Mumbai Indians, but also on a global scale. And I was so, so happy. I know it was against my team, obviously, but I do have a bit of a soft spot for Ishan Kishan and Suryakumar Yadav, because I like to see, no matter which country, I like to see domestic talent get that chance, that opportunity to be rewarded per se, as opposed to just picking the same players again and again and again based off reputation. So for me, Ishan Kishan, I know he didn't have the greatest end to that series, but that debut, my word, the boy's got talent, and if you're an Indian fan, keep an eye on him. Simple as that. He's got a very, very bright future ahead of him, in my personal opinion.
I agree. He looks like a talent for the future. And let's touch upon the other debutant, and Suryakumar Yadav, a long-awaited debut. I know a lot of Indian fans are saying he should have made his debut a long time ago. At 30 years of age, he's no spring chicken, but he's still got some years left in him. And what a way to start off as well. Jofra Archer coming in, bowling a 90-mile-per-hour bouncer, and he just goes, "Thank you very much. I'll just pull you, over deep square leg for 6." And it was just a ridiculous shot, one that you probably just dream of hitting on your debut, really, if your first ball in international cricket. But he went on to, hit a ridiculously good 50-plus score as well, and then went on to score another good 30-plus score as well in the other T20. He looks very, very good, and they'll call for him to be on the ODI side. Obviously, he didn't get that chance. What do you think about him?
Well, he's great. Again, someone who I have a lot of admiration for. I am an RCB fan, so obviously I don't like seeing him and Kishan tearing us to pieces every single year in the IPL. But Suryakumar Yadav, in one word, is class. He's absolutely class. And something which I saw in this series was him really expressing himself. And I think that's a real testament, again, to his character and, of course, the team environment. Because you mentioned that 6 against Archer. That's absolutely preposterous. It was a great, great shot to get off the mark in international cricket. But in addition to that, it was the innovation. He's usually someone who I think as someone a bit more traditional. But in this series, he showed these lovely little flicks. He went down on one knee and went for the scoop shots and the paddle shots as well. He's just got a great repertoire of shots in his arsenal and at his disposal. So for me, Suryakumar Yadav, again, it put a smile on my face. I like to see him being rewarded. He has been in the IPL for years. He's been so consistent. He's been one of Mumbai Indians' leading run scorers for the past 3 seasons. Was in fact their leading run scorer last year when they had a team featuring the likes of Rohit Sharma, Quinton de Kock, Kishan and the Pandya brothers and Pollard. So yeah, for me, Yadav, almost a bright spark in that team. And fingers crossed he gets more opportunities alongside Sanju Samson. he's another one who I hope gets a few more chances in the future as well to really express himself in T20s.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny that you said that he, in a way, you associated him with being a bit more traditional in the way that he plays. And actually, it's funny because I haven't really seen much of him at all. And I got that feeling a little bit, and not a bad feeling, because obviously you said he still was playing those flicks, etc. But I got the feeling that he could potentially, and I don't know exactly how good his longer format stats are. I think in one day, his one day stats are pretty good. I don't know what his like Ranji Trophy stats are, kind of the longer format and the 4-day stuff, but he looks like someone who normally I look at a player on debut and I can normally, I feel like I can normally tell whether they can play all 3 formats, whether they have that. So Devon Conway's one that I saw recently, and I saw him in the T20,
easily.
and I just thought, mate, this guy can play. He can play ODIs and Test cricket easily, and he obviously proved it recently in the ODI Series against Bangladesh, right? Scored, and I was so happy for him. Actually tagged him, and I think my excitement. I think he saw it, but probably was like, "Who's this freak tagging me and stuff?" Going my boy Devon Conway. But yeah. I think Sky, as he likes to be called, or fans do, looks like a similar player. He looks like someone who he looks like he could be a fixture in all. He is 30 though, but I feel like maybe that maturity he's gained with age probably is the reason as well why he looks more comfortable. Ishan Kishan, I think, is a very good talent. He's a bit younger. I feel like he's more of a T20 specialist. I could be wrong, but I feel like this is really his kind of format, Ishan Kishan. Whereas Surya Kumar Yadav, I feel like he could play in different formats. And that's kind of the feeling I get. I guess time will tell. India's so strong, so I don't even know if we'll get a chance. But let's see. Kind of going on from the debutants who perform really well onto someone who in the past has performed extremely well for Indian T20s, but unfortunately didn't have a particularly good series. He did redeem himself in the ODI series, KL Rahul, but his T20 series was really, really poor, and he lacked a lot of confidence. He got cleaned up quite a few times in kind of uncharacteristic ways. Ate a few deliveries, chipped it to mid-on, mid-off, just didn't look himself. And I think a lot of people are saying he wasn't in good form. I think the 2 games before the series, I said, look, he's been so good for a number of years. You've got to stick with him for the whole series. I reckon I feel like there's going to be pressure on him in the IPL, because I know India placed a lot of importance on that. And again, similar conditions. I feel like if he doesn't perform in the IPL, considering they've got no more T20s, he might not make the side. Now, I think there's a lot of pressure on him, and his T20 days may be numbered. What are your thoughts?
It's an interesting one. Again, a player that I have great admiration for. I remember him starting off his career in Karnataka, still plays for Karnataka. And of course, RCB, when the scorecard used to read Lokesh Rahul instead of K. Rahul. So for me, I'll always have that respect for him. I like K. Rahul. He is one of my favourite Indian players. I never think that RCB should have got rid of him. And you talk there about IPL. If we're talking consistency, there's a reason why K. Rahul is being given this chance so often in the India team. It's because 2018, third leading run scorer, 2019, second, 2020, orange cap holder. That is incredible consistency. He scored 24% of Punjab's entire runs in the 3 years that he's been there. So for me, I don't think it's a case of him having a bad IPL. He knows the IPL. He's brilliant in the IPL. He's one of the most prolific run scorers. Whether or not he'll be the orange cap holder, only time will tell. It's as simple as that. He's going to have to rely on his middle order as well, of course, in this year's tournament, try and get them through to the playoffs and accentuate the amount of opportunities he gets to score runs. But for me, I don't think it's a case of Kara Hall just being dropped entirely. He's so good. And if you look at his T20I average, he averages over 40. And yes, he's not had the greatest of times so far. Didn't have a great series against England. Didn't have a great time in Australia either. If you look at his previous record, it speaks for itself. He's a brilliant opening batsman. So for me, yes, India could trial out other ones, but in terms of him being omitted from the squad entirely, I don't see it happening. The fact is, his stats and records speak for themselves, and in my opinion, should be given another chance later down the line.
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess that chance would end up being the World Cup, wouldn't it? Which is strange in a way. They don't have any other T20s leading up to it, but I guess that's just the way their schedule's gone. It's funny because he did have a 40 plus average, and I think it's now gone down to 39.92, but round up to 40.
Yeah.
Unlucky though for him after that really poor series. Unfortunately, he's dropped below that, but he's still, I mean, look, he's a phenomenal player and has been for quite some time in that format. And I think it's more a question of the fact that, well, there's an issue here, isn't there? That he might be in the squad, but Virat Kohli is opening now. Yes. Now, this is what we can go on to quite nicely, which is Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma. Now, he took it upon himself. He said, you know what, KL Rahul, Rohit Sharma, they're my guys. They're going to open. They're definitely going to do it. Then two matches later, he goes, actually, sorry, I'm going to open. He goes, the best player should open. Fair enough. But, obviously that means that there's going to be, unfortunately, for someone like KL Rahul, it looks like he's not going to get a look in the starting 11 anyway, potentially long term. What did you think of that pairing?
Oh, it's an interesting one because for years I've wanted Kohli opening for RCB. And that is going to happen this year alongside Paddy Cow. So I was in favour of it. And of course, it paid off. It was an absolute masterstroke. The only thing that I will say, and this could be interesting into the future, something that England did do in this particular series was bowl early with Adil Rashid. And we saw in that first over between him and Sharma, he only went for 3 runs, but then England put him aside. Now, for me, with Virat Kohli opening, and we've seen this in the IPL with Shreyas Gopal, we've seen it against Adam Zampa, Rashid Khan. I can list you an entire bunch of leg spinners who come on early in Virat Kohli's innings and get him out quite quickly. So that's one thing that I do worry about. If teams are going to go into that World Cup, open up with seam, for example, as most teams do, or open up with off spin, for example, I think Kohli will be absolutely fine. But I think early in his innings, there is this perceived weakness against leg spin. So we'll have to wait and see if it pays off. We will have to wait and see because teams could do that. And if it crops up again in the IPL, again, that could be problematic for India in that next World Cup. But in terms of the partnership itself, I like it. I really, really like it. Kohli's so classy. Of course, it's cliche, but you want your best batsman facing as many deliveries as possible. And then Rohit Sharma's Rohit Sharma. He's the hitman. He's one of the best white ball players in the entire planet. So for me, I like it. Will it be long term, though? We'll have to wait and see because that's the problem with Kohli. You alluded to it there. He said beforehand Rahul was his man, and now he's replaced him. He said that before with Kuldeep Yadav and Yuzvendra Chahal, and that hasn't proved to be the case in the ODIs. He dropped them too the other day as well. So you never know with Virat, you never know with Ravi Shastri. They're always prone to chopping and changing in that squad. But I think if they do go with it, could be pretty good. And it also makes that middle order a lot better, in my opinion. You can bring in another anchor, for example. You can bring in the likes of an Ishan Kishan to add some explosiveness in the middle order. So we'll have to wait and see. But in theory, I quite like it.
It's an interesting one because there's obviously a perception in India they didn't get on as well. So it's interesting they're going to open up and they're going to have to. Well, they performed pretty well in the last one, didn't they? So I guess it looks like on a cricketing basis anyway, they seem to be performing well. So that's an interesting one. I guess watch this space. I think the World Cup will be interesting. I think, as you said, a lot of people will open with leg spin, especially if England, I guess New Zealand got Ish Sodhi, Zampa. That's quite Rashid Khan, obviously. So Pakistan, we've got Shadab Khan. I guess we go with him. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes for sure going forward. We talked about Bhuvneshwar Kumar before. I mean, obviously, amazingly good, very economical. You mentioned the IPL stats there. I think it was one of the power plays is around a 5 economy rate, which is ridiculous. And Shardul Thakur had this exactly the same as in the ODIs, this kind of handy knack of getting wickets in the middle overs after getting slapped in the first, I think, ODI, kind of everywhere. He kind of came back with vengeance almost, which is good to see. I guess finally on the Indian front, I mean, Virat Kohli averages over 200 chasing in India, by the way. For anyone that does, that loves Virat Kohli, that'll be a nice stat to lap up. And obviously, he was a leading run scorer with 231 runs. I guess for you going forward, considering that India won that 3-2, and we're talking the T20s, looking forward to the T20 World Cup, if I had to put you on the spot and say to you, who do you think, not necessarily going to be the favourites, but who would be your pick to go in? Because I think in the back of my head, right, I've got India and England. Obviously, India, I think, are always going to be favourites going into a home World Cup, whether it be T20s or ODIs, in this current generation anyway. Whether they will win or not, I don't know. England obviously will be up there. And I actually think New Zealand are there. And I could be wrong because they're very strong at home, and away from home, we haven't seen as much from them. But the fact that they can just bring in people when Williamson and Taylor are injured or Ferguson injured, and they just come and they found these gems on this little, it's a small country population-wise compared to most other countries. They're a bunch of nice guys, but don't take them for granted or don't think that they're rubbish because they're quality in all formats. So my actually left field choice would be New Zealand, which we'll see whether that happens. What would be your pick?
It's a great question. It really is. And I think it's going to be a fantastic tournament. So for me, I think India are the quote unquote favourites. I think England, of course, you look at that batting, can win them the T20 World Cup alone. You mentioned New Zealand, they're my quote unquote dark horses. And another team which people seem to have almost gone on the radar in a way is the West Indies. I know that they're T20I rankings, and you look at them right now and you think, there's no way they're winning a T20 World Cup. But in bilateral series, they don't have the likes of Andre Russell, Bravo, Pollard, for example. Gale doesn't really play often as well. Looking ahead to the T20 World Cup, they are going to be a force to be reckoned with.
No, they will.
And in addition to that, we talk about spin. If you look at the Caribbean Premier League, for example, they played in Tobago last year, Trinidad and Tobago, at Brian Lara Cricket Academy Stadium in Tarouba, which was really spin conducive. And as I said, these big names actually came to the forefront and played spin pretty well. So I don't think spin's going to phase the West Indies at all. They've got guys in the IPL playing, like Nicholas Pooran, for example, who can come in, be that explosive power hitter in the middle order. So I also fancy the West Indies. But as I said, there's about 4 or 5. Don't discount Pakistan either. I think Pakistan can make a decent charge. I really do. I think Pakistan have got some excellent young players. Hyder Ali, for example, could be an interesting shout for the World Cup.
If we win in India against India in the final, for example, I think they'll have to make a quick exit, let's say, from the stadium, which would be quite funny. But yeah, I think Pakistan are. I think we've always got a chance. We've got a lot of talent, unrefined talent, and I think it's the makeup of our team who we pick. We've been a bit better with. You mentioned actually quite rightly so that you want to see people picked on domestic performances rather than reputation. I think Pakistan are starting to do that more so. And it's funny, the West Indies I completely forgot, but I shouldn't, because I keep on saying, like you, they're the World Cup champions.
Yeah,
coming into this, they're defending champions, right? And I saw them in the T20 series against Sri Lanka, and they had also had Lendl Simmons and Alvin Lewis opening up, and they had Chris Gayle at 3, and they were still missing people like Hetmyer could come into there. Mm-hmm. They still had Andre Russell who was missing, Sheldon Cottrell was missing, and if you look at that middle order, I mean, they had Dwayne Bravo, I think, at 8 or 9, and he can still bat. So let's be honest, let's kind of not forget him. So, I mean, he's still a fantastic death bowler and change-up bowler. So they've got a lot going for the West Indies, and I think I agree with you. I think you can't sleep on them. They'll be up there, I think. So it'll be an intriguing World Cup for sure. Okay, let's kind of wrap up then with the Test match series. I wanted to leave the kind of most upsetting series to last for you, Aaron, because this was let's say a bit of an interesting series to say the least. Started off so well for England, Joe Root with a magnificent double hundred, and it just looked like, you know what, India were going to be quite nice with the pitches. It would be, bit of bat, equal between bat and ball. It'd be fantastic, and Joe Root just knocking it around, sweeping fantastically. I think he swept something like 70% of his deliveries from spin in the Sri Lanka tour, or something ridiculous, and came into the India tour, just carried on his form in ridiculous fashion. And England were 1-0 up, and you're just thinking, I'm thinking to myself, my 2-2 prediction in the Test match is going to come true, but probably. I was thinking, will it even be 3-1 England? I thought, no, that's probably getting ahead of myself. And then India just thought, you know what? We've given you a little nice pitch there to play on, but we're going to utilize our advantage as a home team, and we're going to give you an absolute bunting that's going to turn, and you're going to have to deal with it. And with your inexperienced players, like your Ollie Popes and Rory Burns and Dom Sibley, who've never played in India, good luck playing on this, because it might be tough for us, but it's going to be even tougher for you. And obviously they came out there winning that 3-1, really running away from it after that first Test match. What were your initial thoughts, actually, just on the Test series as a whole?
Well, I think in terms of the Test series as a whole, you just have to give a lot of credit to India. As simple as that. In Test cricket, there are no excuses. The better team won the series. It's as simple as that. And you look at that spin duo of Ravichandran Ashwin and Akshar Patel, and they were just incredible. They're absolutely unstoppable. 59 wickets between them. They actually outbowled England's entire bowling lineup in terms of wickets taken in the series. So, yes, I know there was a lot of controversy about umpiring decisions, about pitches, this, that, the other, the pink ball as well, which was just incredible, that match in Ahmedabad, the third Test match. But I think overall, we actually saw some very, very good Test cricket at times. I just think in terms of England's batting in particular, it was ridiculously one-dimensional. And I don't think that the approach to batting in India, you have to be a lot more proactive. I felt like we were very much just set in our ways, playing the ball on the back foot, not moving the feet. And I was just looking at that entire series and thinking, we're in so much trouble here. Because if you look at India's batsmen, and this goes all the way down to Ashwin with that century in Chennai in the second Test as well, moving his feet, meeting the ball from Jack Leach and Bess as soon as they're pretty much bowling it. It was as simple as that. And yet England just stayed in the crease, not proactive, going for the sweep again and again and again. And you just saw stumps flying and LBWs all over the place. And the weirdest part of the entire Test series, which has to be said, was the straight ball. The stock arm ball, which just slid onto the stumps. And that was a wicket taking delivery again and again and again and again. And it's just like, what is going on in this series? So I think at times it's a lack of application from the batsman. I think it was great bowling as well. I myself am a spinner. I loved watching Patel. I loved watching Ashwin. I loved watching Jack Leach as well against Pujara. Thought that was a very intriguing battle in the series. But yeah, overall, excellent from India. And yeah, not the greatest of series, say the least, from the 3 Lions and a Crown.
Yeah, yeah. I bought a bit of leg spin myself, actually. Well, I'm more of a batsman, let's be honest. I open the batting, my local club. So I just say I tinker a little bit with leg spin. But yeah, it's interesting when you said, I think rightly so, you said that India won it fair and square in the sense that, look, the best team won the series. I think you can definitely say that. I think the reason why you can say that for anyone who does have any qualms about the pitches is that in the fourth test match, that was a pretty darn good pitch, a strip, right? And India still outplayed England. I think that kind of showed the kind of golfing class between the two teams in these conditions, anyway, for sure. The second and third test match pitches, I'm going to be totally honest with you, I think they were pretty atrocious. I can't believe I think the IC gave it as average, which is, yeah, I still think they're trying to find the groundsman for that pitch. I think they still can't locate it, which is hilarious. But that aside, I think even if they were good pitches, India still would have won them, I think, is what we can take from that. So that aside, I think looking at an India were superior side, but I want to touch on England first, just because I think that's going to be the most fun for sure, Aaron.
Yep.
Let's start from the top. So obviously Sibley and Burns, right, are supposed to be Crawley obviously fractured his wrist, I think it was. Sibley and Burns opening up. Burns wasn't available for the Sri Lanka tour because he had a birth of his child, so that's fair enough. And now after the summer, you're thinking they have this set lineup now, which is Burns, Sibley, and Crawley. Crawley at 3 because he batted really well, and I don't want to remember it, but that 267 against Pakistan will probably haunt me in my dreams. Yeah, it was a great knock. One of my mates is a Kent fan. He doesn't let me forget it. Yeah, fantastic knock from him. But going into this series, they obviously went, okay, we're going to stick with Sibley and Burns because Crawley's not in there. Burns quickly kind of was thrown to the wayside as if like, you know what, you're not good enough. They brought in Crawley to open with Sibley. And really, all 3 of them just couldn't quite do it. I know it's their first time playing in India, but I want to get your opinion on it. And just firstly, what did you think of the 3 playing in India? And second of all, long term, what's going to be the opening pair? And who's going to battle 3? Because I thought it was Crawley, but it looks like they don't want to play. They don't want to open with Burns, which means they have to decide: does Crawley open or does he bat 3? And then they have to fill that gap. So what do you think?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? It really is. And the worst thing that could have happened for England on this tour, and it's exactly what happened, is you end the tour having more questions than answers. And I think that's exactly what's happened with the whole thing with Dom Sibley. I know a lot of people potentially don't like the way in which he plays, but the fact is he's produced the good for England. I mean, as much as people can hate on his technique and he takes too much time and he doesn't have enough shots, this, that, the other, the fact is he does produce these match-winning knocks time and time again. And even if it's once every 3-4 games, they're still incredibly invaluable knocks. The 87, for example, you mentioned Joe Root's 218, but that was set up on day 1 by Dom Sibley, pretty much going into trench warfare mode against the likes of Ashwin and Bumrah. You look back to the Sri Lanka series, the 56 out in the second test there, 120 against the West Indies, 133 against South Africa and Newlands. So overall, as much as you can probably tell, I'm a massive, massive Dom Sibley fan. I'm a Warwickshire fan. I was there when he actually got his call-up, 23rd of September 2019 on the Tannoys against Yorkshire. But the fact is, he didn't have a good series. None of them did. And again, it comes back to England's approach against spin. For all of the spin camps, this, that, the other, and all of these technical masterclasses that they've all had, the technique was just completely, completely wrong. It was wrong from the get-go, basically. Just planting the foot in the crease, playing off the back foot. This isn't, with all due respect, you're not playing in Australia, you're not playing in England, South Africa, where there's maybe a couple of degrees of turn. In particular on day 1, there may be next to nothing. In India, you can have 5 degrees of turn on day 1. You have to actually be proactive. You have to be, what to say, a bit more innovative with your footwork per se. You need to move your feet. You need to move the crease. You need to manipulate fields. And that's something which the top three simply didn't do. Now, of course, there are mitigating factors against that. Dom Sibley and Zach Crawley, for all of these brilliant knocks that the two have had, this is their first ever tour of India. India is one of the, if not the hardest places to tour as an England player because of the alien conditions and the quality of spin and the pitches themselves. With Rory Burns as well, yes, he is more experienced, but again, he's only been England's opener since 2019 and he hadn't played in Sri Lanka. I think that was the key. I mean, it's not very fair to expect Rory Burns, even though he is seen as the experienced head of that top three, to come in off the back of a winter where he's done absolutely nothing, drafted him straight into Chennai, and you expect him to be the figurehead. I don't think that was particularly fair. So yes, disappointing. But with that being said, I still see England's top three as Burns, Sibley, and Zach Crawley at three. I think Zach Crawley in the future is an opening batsman. We know what he can do for Kent. He seems a very technically astute and capable batsman. I just don't think he's ready just yet for that responsibility, especially when we have another 5 match against India and then the Ashes. So to answer your second question, Faizan, I would keep with Burns and Sibley. Number three would be Crawley, but and here's the key thing, in the subcontinent, if we don't see those guys as being the best options, what England could do is be a little bit malleable. We could be flexible. Why not bring in a Keaton Jennings, for example, who has a lot of success in the subcontinent, was brilliant against Sri Lanka in 2018. Remember 2016 as well in Mumbai, that brilliant knock at the Wankhede Stadium. And then Johnny Bairstow as well. And I know Bairstow didn't have the greatest series in this particular test series against India. But again, the whole thing about him being drafted in and expected to hit the ground running from ball one, it's not feasible. So yes, to answer your question, Faizan, Burns, Sibley, Crawley, but we could have some variations depending on conditions heading into the future.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with you. I think they should stick with those three. I think it's really, really, really harsh to drop them because they're not very experienced and it's their first time playing in India. So, it's funny because Crawley, I talked to Daniel Bell Drummond, his opening partner at Kent, and he was saying to me that Crawley is just he's very extremely talented and kind of looking at him from the other end, he is just someone who he's not surprised at all that he performed so well in the summer and he expects him to do some big things for England going forward. Burns and Sibley not necessarily the most attractive players to watch, but it doesn't matter if you get the job done right. It's Test cricket at the end of the day. It is the pinnacle of the sport. I think still, in my opinion, and
same here.
I think when you look at it, if you've got solid technique and solid defense, which I think on this tour they didn't, but I think for the most part they do these two. If you can build a solid foundation, and it's funny because I think the philosophy from England in Test cricket is obviously very, very different to white ball. I think that's changed with the management. Trevor Bayliss was a bit more attacking. Now they've got Chris Silverwood, who seems to be more grinded out, which is fine. I think England kind of need to kind of adapt to that for sure. You said about Keaton Jennings, I can get on board with that. The Johnny Bairstow one, I want to be honest with you, I think he's done. Yeah, I mean, how many Test matches he had? 77, I think it is, something like that. And I know he's shown flashes. He had a pretty good Sri Lanka tour, and I just think he's just too hit and miss personally for me. And even in the subcontinent, I know I agree with you. Like he got drafted back in, it's hard. They probably should have just said stay on tour or asked him if they wanted to. But if they asked him, they should have asked him and not done it open in the media like they did with Moeen Ali probably, which we'll touch on very briefly. But yeah, they could have, and he might have said, actually, yeah, fine, why not? Or he might have said, actually, no, I don't want to, which is up to him. But yeah, to then draft him back and expect to is difficult. But I think the fact that he got so many ducks in a row, I think doesn't help his cause probably. And I think the nickname of Bairstow was trending, which is probably not a good thing for him either. But he redeemed himself anyway in the T20s and ODIs. So that's the most important thing, which we know he is a fantastic white ball player. The red ball stuff, I think, probably personally for me, I don't think it's quite for him. Ben Stokes is an interesting one because I went very left field and I said, when asked about who I think is going to be the leading run scorer in the series, I was so confident in Ben Stokes' ability. I said, you know what? Ben Stokes is going to do it. He's going to get over his issues with Ashwin in the series and he's going to be the leading run scorer. He let me down just a little bit, let's say. I mean, he got a couple of decent scores, to be fair to him. A couple of very, very good knocks. For the most part, he just was haunted by Ashwin, I think, for the most part. What do you think about that? I mean, he needs to get over that at some point.
Well, yeah, it's easy for us to say. It's easy for any fan, isn't it? To say, right, Ben, go out there and hit Ravichandran Ashwin. Okay, go out there, get him on the back foot right from ball one, and yeah, improve that. But the one thing that I will say about Ben Stokes, mentioned there about Rory Burns, the exact same thing happened. He wasn't on the Sri Lanka tour, of course, with the passing of his dad. So with Ben Stokes in that particular series, I was a lot more lenient with him because I thought that is a mitigating factor. At the end of the day, we all know how close he was with Jed. Of course, the celebration, and it's his dad at the end of the day. So for me, I know it was a disappointing series, but I could understand it with Ben Stokes. He was a bit rusty, hadn't really played a lot of cricket since the summer, and then of course had that on top. It wasn't the easiest series to come into in general. But with regards to the whole battle against Ashwin, Ashwin's a master. Let's face it. I know Ben Stokes. We all know about Ben Stokes, the Headingley knot, for example. We know what Ben Stokes is capable of. But Ashwin is an absolute genius. He really is. If you look at his wrist position and seam position of the cricket ball, it's immaculate. It should be in a textbook. Every single young Indian spinner should look at Ravichandran Ashwin and at least try his variations. And the thing with Ben Stokes as well in this series, I don't think he could pick him. I think that's the issue. Because you look at Ashwin, the bag of tricks, he's got the carrot ball, the arm ball, sliders. He throws in the occasional leg break in there as well, just for the fun of it. So for me, I don't think it's something which can be easily, what to say, rectified per se. But again, it's Ashwin, and if that is a battle which England unfortunately do end up on the wrong side of, we do need to find a silver bullet for it. But that's not going to be easy. It's Ashwin. I mean, so I'm going to be honest, Faizan. I don't know if there is a magical remedy for it. But in terms of the
Yeah.
series between him and Ben Stokes, Ashwin obviously got the better of him.
Well, I mean, to be fair, he's the best test spinner in the world. I think
He
that's
is.
probably widely
He
regarded,
is.
for sure. So I think he's, yeah. I don't expect him to get over it straight away, but he's such a talented and skilled player. But I just thought, maybe. But look, I think he'll get there in the end. He's still got some years left, and I'm sure he will be on the next tour to India at some point,
Mhm.
whenever that is. England may delay it maybe for another 5 years, but we'll see. But we'll see how it goes. But I think, look, the Ashwin is just incredible, as you said, I think. And it's interesting because from what I know, he grew up as a batsman who could bowl a little bit, and it's actually just developed into he's this kind of mystery spinner. I think that's why when he bowls, it looks quite unorthodox at times. He's not your orthodox. You're right in what you say. His seam position and wrist position is perfect. If you look at his action, it's very
Yeah.
basic almost. It's something that you'd see, your local club, and you watch him bowl and think, oh, he's really average. But then next thing you face him and you're getting cleaned up because he's just so talented. And when it comes out of his hand, that's it. It's magic almost. But kind of leaving nicely on Akshar Patel. I mean, how good was he on his debut? I know they're helpful pitches, especially two of them, but he just was incredible. And it's interesting you said about the straighter ball. I think especially him, that one that slid on the arm ball, people were getting out LBW. I think it's because two reasons. One, just because, especially when a pitcher's turning that much, the different kind of degree of spin they were seeing and an inconsistency. I think some batsmen were not able to adapt. But I think a good point that a lot of commentators made and pundits was you want to be playing inside the line of the ball then.
Mm-hmm.
And if you nick off, then fine, you say it's a good ball, but you shouldn't be getting trapped LBW. I think that's the issue a lot of them had. But also the pink ball, from what I know, and I've played with it in a couple of T20s for my local club, and I don't know if it's exactly the same. It's probably a bit different. But from what I've noticed, and they said it, and I thought actually that makes sense because I've noticed it when I was batting, is it seems to skid on a lot quicker once it's pitched. And I definitely noticed that. I think that didn't help. And I think a lot of these players are just as inexperienced playing as a pink ball as me, which is kind of crazy to sound as it sounds, but I don't think they played much pink ball cricket at all. So that might have been a factor as well. But yeah, Akshar Patel, I mean, how impressive was he?
Oh, brilliant. And just to touch upon your point with the pink ball, it is a fantastic point. And obviously that test was an absolute mess. I feel like it was an experiment gone wrong, wasn't it? Pink ball under the lights in a brand new stadium and on an absolute bunsen of a pitch. But the reason why it slides on, for those who don't know, first of all, it has a more pronounced seam. And second of all, the thing why it skids on so much is the lacquer. And something which Channel 4 showed so brilliantly, Simon Hughes, the analyst, he showed a red ball, which is about 50, 60 overs old, and it looked battered. In comparison to a pink ball, it still had a bit of a gloss and a shine on it. So that means if you can just hit it on the right point, even if it's 55, 60 overs in and a batsman's expecting it to turn, it straightens. So that is something that Akshar Patel and Ashwin, to be fair, did absolutely brilliantly. And to talk about Akshar in particular, this is something which obviously brilliant. Had a great series. I thought it was excellent with his line and length. Had an average of about 10 as well, which was just ridiculous. But left arm spin and leg spin in Test cricket is a real kryptonite of England at the moment. And it's something which I'm very, very worried about us facing because this isn't the first time. Look at Sri Lanka, Lasithan Bordenaya. Look in the summer, Yasir Shah, and they weren't on spin conducive pitches either. You go back to South Africa and New Zealand as well with Santner Maharaj. This issue is cropping up time and time and time again. And again, I think it is due to technical flaws. I feel like we plant ourselves in the crease. You mentioned there about playing inside the line as well. How many of our batsmen, you look at Kohli and Pujara and Sharma, for example, they all play on a leg stump guard, okay, and they play the ball on its merits. A lot of our players were playing with a middle stump guard, and that really left them exposed to having the LBW when the balls just slide on. So for me, again, as good as Axar did bowl, I feel like England at times did make him look even better because we didn't apply ourselves correctly. And that is something which Chris Silverwood, Jonathan Trott, Marcus Trescothick as well now, as the new batting coach, really, really need to look at and assess heading into future tours, not just of India, but Sri Lanka and Bangladesh as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because going back to my good old mate KP, he was saying that he goes onto leg stump as a guard, right? And that's how he combated his deficiency to left arm spin. And he just said, look, if I then play inside the line and it whizzes past me, then okay, yeah, it looks great. It's a fantastic ball, but doesn't do anything. But the issue is that obviously if you then start playing offside of the ball, which you're technically falling over, you're getting trapped LBW. And he said, look, you need to just open up. And he said a really interesting technique, which you might find interesting. I thought it was very interesting what he was talking about was he said himself, Root and Bairstow, which obviously didn't help those two too much on this tour. But on the whole, he said, I think for them in 2012, when England actually went and won with Monty Panesar and Graham Swan, he said they were in the nets. And what they would do is they'd chuck balls up to each other. And even if it was outside leg stump, they'd have to find a way of playing it towards the offside. And what that meant is that they would always be leg side of the ball and make sure they were inside the line, and they were using more their hands, right, than planting their feet. And it was all kind of hands, making sure you're inside the line, making sure you're giving yourself as much time as possible. And what it meant, he said, is that when you went on to the out into the middle, even, it just meant you had a lot more time on the ball because you're so used to moving your feet and being, as you mentioned, proactive is I think the right word for it. And that was really interesting that he was talking about it. He did say it after the Test series, which I thought was a bit cheeky of him because we'd already been cleaned up, England had. But yeah, that was an interesting point he made. And talking of spinners, I mean, there's three spinners in question for England, but we'll touch upon the biggest positive, which is Jack Leach, who seems to have come into his own. I mean, obviously still not at the level of your Ashwins or Axar Patels, but 18 wickets for him. And I think he seems to have grown in confidence. It was a bit worrying, he said, after he got hit by Pant in one of the Test matches, that he thought about retiring. I know he does have slight, he has had mental issues in the past. So it was good to see him kind of, I think, get over those slightly, especially when he kind of went forward in the series. And I think I saw him get hit a couple of times and he just kind of went, okay, that's happened, move on, and actually got wickets or what came back strong. And someone, I guess, who's a good comparison, but in a different format, is Adil Rashid, who used to have that similar, he used to fall apart when getting hit, but nowadays he's fine. What do you think about Jack Leach? I mean, I think he's coming to his own, and most likely he's going to be the number one spinner, I think, for England.
Oh, yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think a lot of people like Jack Leach. And he had an excellent series. And the key thing with Leachy, and it was something which Ashwin and Patel did so brilliantly as well for India, was just bowl a metronomic line and length. Just aim for one area, bowl it in there time and time and time again. Because eventually, instead of searching for a wicket, the batsman's going to make a mistake. They're either going to come down and charge you, get stumped, or they're going to misplay it, misread it, and it'll go onto the stumps or an edge, this, that, the other. So that's something which I think Jack Leach did really well. Just metronomic, really consistent, and I think he had an excellent series. I'm going to be honest, took 18 wickets, I believe, for England, and obviously was our standout spinner. So for me, without a shadow of a doubt, he's our lead spinner now. He's done nothing wrong. I think his average is around about 29 as well, which obviously isn't elite in comparison to an Ashwin or Patel, who's been just ridiculous ever since making his debut, really. But I still think he's done excellently, and I think Jack Leach definitely should be leading England's front line. Sorry, in the spin department. Sorry, heading into future tours in the subcontinent.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess that leads me on to Don Bess. So I'll tell you my opinion on him. And I'll get your thoughts. So my opinion on him is quite talented. I've seen him quite a bit actually live for England in the UK, and I think he's improved slightly. Probably not as much as I would have expected, because I saw him bowl maybe 3-4 years ago against Pakistan actually at Lords a couple of years back. Yeah, so I was after seeing him a few times, and then also kind of going forward now into this Sri Lanka tour, he looked pretty good. Well, I say looked pretty good. There were a few fortunate wickets, let's say, for him. So stats-wise, he looked pretty good in the Sri Lanka tour. But I just had a feeling, and obviously it came to fruition in the India tour, that his luck would eventually run out. And I guess that inconsistency that was there would creep in and come to the forefront. And that seemed to happen in the India tour. I'm of the opinion that he is very talented. He's still young. He's still got a lot of time. I think he should be playing England Lions for a couple of years, 2-3 years, kind of get his confidence up, get his form, play all around the world in different conditions. And then I think he will be ready for England. I just think at the moment it's a little too early for him. I just think he was thrust in there, and I think England were a bit fascinated with his batting, but that's not a reason to pick a frontline spinner or a spinner at all for that fact. And yeah, I just think for me personally, he's a long-term option, but in this shorter term, I think they need to look after him, get his confidence up. I think he looked pretty battered, his confidence as well, and rightly so. And he's still so inconsistent. So work on his game and come back. What are your thoughts?
I would agree with that, Faizan. I'm going to be honest. I'm quite a big fan of Don Bess, and I did an entire analysis on, obviously, his Test career to date. The thing that I would say, I didn't like the way in which he was dropped and then immediately brought back in. I think that was completely the wrong message for Don Bess. If you're going to drop him for the rest of the series. Don't drop him for one match and then bring him in. So let's face it was basically a series decider. The series is on the line. I know the World Test Championship had gone by then. And then for him to go out there and get hammered again, I really didn't like that at all from England. I thought that's completely the wrong message to send out to a young spinner. And the thing with Dom, he does have this raw potential. He does, for all of the things that people have been saying about, oh, he's too inconsistent, he gets lucky wickets, this, that, the other. He does get wickets. It's as simple as that. I know it's very cliche, but it doesn't really matter how they come. When you look at a scorecard, for example, when you look at stats, it doesn't tell you exactly how it was bowled. But the key there is that he is getting wickets. And for me, he's, 22, 23 years of age. He's still a very, very young spinner. What I think a lot of people don't realise is that the art of spin bowling and spin bowlers in general, it takes you until about 28, 29, even 30 years of age to really reach your peak maturity. Look at Adam Zampa, for example. Adil Rashid's another great one. Adil Rashid has gotten so much better with age, and it will happen with Don Bess. It just takes time. He needs to be a bit more metronomic, a bit like Jack Leach, a bit like Ashwin, for example, with his line and length. So I think it will come, but I agree with you there, Faizan. I think he really needs the backing now of the ECB, England Support Network, his brand new County Yorkshire as well in the County Championship. He needs people around him just to be almost, put a shoulder around him. Say, right, Dom, it's maybe not the right time for you right now, but we have faith in you. We've seen what you can do, in international cricket, and we believe there's a future for you. But you have to give him ample opportunity with the Lions, for Yorkshire as well, come summer. And I think that if we give him that time and we are patient with Don Bess, I think he'll come good. But I agree. I feel like we did rush him. I think we got a bit caught up with regards to the way in which he was getting so many wickets. And unfortunately, it's not ended greatly on this particular tour.
Yeah, I agree. I think he definitely needs to be more metronomic, that's for sure, in his line length. 100% agreed. But I think something is funny. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Well, I played devil's advocate. Actually, I'm going to tell you what I think, because I think when you said about a scorecard, I totally get it about him getting wickets. I just think the issue that I have is that luck. And again, maybe it's not luck. Maybe he is getting wickets. Let's say that wicket-taking ability that he was using on the skill level he had, it would run out at some point. I think that's what we've seen here. But he's got that raw potential, as you said. And there are some wickets that he got which are fantastic, and you can see that ability there. It's about honing, I think, which you've alluded to. And again, it might take him a few years, but I think maybe just at the international stage, it's a case of him going with England Lions, kind of with Yorkshire as well, as you said, honing his craft and then coming back and saying, you know what, I'm the man. But yeah, I think England didn't handle it well. I mean, what was it? The third one, Root was the spinner, really. He bowled a lot of overs. And then when Bess came back, I think Root ended up bowling, if
more
not
overs.
as many overs or more overs than Don Bess. So that kind of shows you the lack of faith in him. And if they were going to do that, they may as well just gone with one of the reserve spinners like Ahmed Birdie or Matt Parkinson or Mason Crane. I mean, they may as well just done that and give them experience. So that was a weird one for sure for me. Moeen Ali. Now, you know, I'm quite a big fan of his. I'm not going to go too much into the mismanagement, which I think has happened over a number of years, and one I think up and down, kind of shunted around the order, etc. But let's just take it, I guess, on the basis of the tour and this series. Obviously, he played the first match after getting COVID for the Sri Lanka tour, so didn't really come in. He bowled in the first innings. I think he got 4 wickets, but he was a little bit expensive. I remember seeing all the forums going, "Oh my god, he's rubbish. He's rubbish," and I was like, "Is he?" I was like, "I don't think he is." And I was like, "He's got 4 wickets and he's rusty, right? So that will happen. He might go for a few runs." And the second innings, obviously, he did a lot better. And I think the naysayers kind of went away, and he obviously got that 40 odd as well. After that, he was scheduled to go home. Now, I think that was all fine. Obviously, England didn't handle it in the correct way. I don't want to go into that too much because I think they admitted they were wrong. They apologised. Fine, fair enough. And so Joe Root said it as well. And it was scheduled, so fine. I think they put him on the spot a little bit in the media, and it was probably a bit unfair considering the treatment he's got. But let's look at it from just the purely cricketing point of view and basis. Where is he, do you think, in the sense of for England in Test cricket? Because they're going to come in the summer and India are going to come. He's got a very good record against people like Kohli. But obviously, Jack Leach looks like he probably will be the lead spinner. I don't think they're going to play 2 spinners, so I think it's going to be between those two. Now, obviously, Moeen offers you stuff with the bat, but Jack Leach has also just bowled well. So I feel like they are in a predicament because Moeen hasn't played enough cricket, which is not his fault. And obviously, it's not, well, in Test matches anyway, it's not England's fault. It took a break for whatever reasons. And now going forward, he's bowled quite well. And they're thinking, oh, hold on, you bowled quite well. You can give us runs at the bottom. But Jack Leach is now coming into form. So what do you think they're going to do going forward?
Well, heading into our international summer here in England, I think they'll stick with Leachy. I'm going to be honest. I know Mo, he did have some bright spells, to be honest, in that India tour. Of course, got a fourfer, got Kohli out with an absolute jaffer as well. So he did bowl decently at times. But the whole problem with Moeen Ali has just been a complete lack of consistency. And another thing which I think has really, really impacted him, and I wish he could have got a bit more of, was county cricket under his belt. I feel like when he had that break, even beforehand, even when he wasn't England's frontline spinner, when we were going with Leach and Bess, if they just could have released him to Worcestershire, get some confidence back in his ability, allow him to take more wickets. And that's something which unfortunately didn't happen. And let's not forget that Moeen Ali, ever since Graham Swan's retirement, has been England's leading spinner in terms of wickets. He's taken 50 more than Adil Rashid. So Moeen Ali obviously has the pedigree. He is, on paper at least, England's best spin option. The only issue is that when you compare him like for like with Jack Leach at the moment, Jack Leach is better than him. And in English conditions, we're not playing every single game at a Rose Bowl in the height of summer or Old Trafford at the height of summer. There's going to be different venues. We're playing at Edgbaston Lords and Headingley, for example. We are only going to need one spinner. So for me, I think they'll stick with Jack Leach. But with that being said, if Moeen can get some more confidence, get some more rhythm, and another thing as well, Silverwood and the management really need to be clear. Again, I mentioned earlier about clarity with Alex Hales. Be clear with Moeen Ali about his role in this team. Because if not, as I said, release him into county cricket. Get him playing some games for Worcestershire. Okay, it's better than not playing any cricket and then being forced into the Lions' den, proverbially, whenever we need him in the Test arena. So yeah, I think with Moeen Ali, I think he'll still be in the squad. I don't think this is England getting rid of Moeen Ali for the rest of time by any means. But I think for the time being, I think Leachy has earned his spot. As I said, he's done nothing wrong. He's been pretty good with his line and length, got plenty of wickets as well. I feel like Jack Leach is the frontline spinner, with Moeen Ali as almost his second in line per se.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the way they're going to go for sure. And I could probably do a two-hour episode on Moeen Ali in his career and the ups and downs and kind of sideways movements, but and we'll leave that for another day. just to wrap up then, I guess, because I think from the Indian front, they won it 3-1. I know they've got a few question marks potentially around them in Lauder, but I think they'll come good. So I don't think that we need to touch upon it too much, really. I don't think there's too many question marks, I would say, around them. There's this whole thing around Kohli not getting a century since the start of 2019, but his form's been pretty good. So I don't think he'll be too worried. I don't think India are too worried about it either. And also the captaincy issue, I think was obviously crept up during the tour, but then they won 3-1. So how can you say that? They're saying, maybe it should be Rohit Sharma T20s, maybe Kohli ODIs, and then Rahane in the test arena, and then it puts less pressure on him. I guess ideally he could have that, but I think he wants the captaincy, and clearly I think it's hard to take it away from when he's done so well, kind of in that role. Are you of the same opinion?
Yeah, I think Kohli should stay for the time being, to be honest. You want stability. It's as simple as that. It's be like England splitting the captaincy 3 ways. I wouldn't want that personally. I'd want it split 2-1 per se. But I think Kohli's done a good job in the series. I think he captained well at times as well. And even though he hasn't got that elusive 71st century, he didn't bat poorly at all. So yeah, I don't really think Kohli's any problematic. And to be honest, with a guy like Kohli, it's a matter of time. He'll probably get it this summer against England, knowing our luck as well.
Yeah, I was waiting for the double 100 in the 3rd or 4th test match. It didn't happen. So yeah, interesting one for sure. But as you said, I think it'll probably come at the worst time for England in a match defining
series
moment.
Decider.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And that's all from me. Is there anything you want to touch on before we wrap up?
I think we've pretty much covered every single base there Fire's done, to be honest. I don't really think there's much more that I needed to touch upon. I mean, we've covered all 3 series, haven't we?
Yes, we have. The pleasure as always, though, to have you on, Aaron. I say as always, first time, so thank you very much, though, for being on. It's been an absolute pleasure talking cricket, and you said that I hope I haven't bored you anyway, as well.
Oh, absolutely not, no. I mean, I'd say likewise as well, obviously, to your viewers out there as well. Apologies. But yeah.
No, it's been fantastic speaking to you, and hopefully we can get you on again to talk cricket, and really enjoyed it. And where can people find you? So you've obviously got your podcast. Do you want to plug yourself?
Oh, just briefly, yeah, the County Cricket Podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, at the County Cricket on Twitter, and yeah, just give it a listen. We've got some good guests, some good, obviously, banter on there as well with me and my co-host Joe Nutsy Nuttall. So yeah, if you want to listen to some county cricket related content, as I said, with good guests, good interviews, the County Cricket Podcast is the place for you. Perfect.
Yeah, and also follow you on Instagram, which you've got fantastic little snippets and bite-sized little reviews and stuff as well, which is really nice. So make sure you follow Aaron at the Cricket Connoisseur, isn't it?
Yep, with an underscore. Yep.
With underscore, okay, on Instagram. Thanks very much, mate. And guys as well, please do remember to like the channel and subscribe as well if you haven't already. Thank you very much for tuning in.